George Paddington, an orphan who lost his parents during the COVID-19 pandemic, was a prodigious video game blogger. One fateful day, he dies in an accident while saving a 3-year-old child. However, instead of passing on, he wakes up in the Harry Potter universe, inside the body of a 15-year-old Severus Snape, right after his infamous fallout with Lily Evans. Armed with knowledge of the future and guided by Eva, an AI assistant-like system, George must navigate the complexities of the wizarding world. With humor, danger, love, and self-discovery shaping his journey, he embraces the magic, intrigue, and challenges of his new reality. Will he alter Snape's fate or remain bound to the tragic path history has written? Hello, everyone. Omni Sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in Harry Potter as a Young Severus Snape? Part 1. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it. George Paddington had always been alone, not by choice, but by cruel design. The world had not been kind to him, and it all started with a cough. Just a simple, persistent cough from his mother one evening that turned into something far worse. It was late 2020, the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. George was only 16 when he stood outside the ICU, watching helplessly as doctors in full PPE suits rushed past him, their expressions hidden behind layers of protective gear. His father had been admitted 3 days before his mother. George had barely been able to speak to them before they were whisked away into isolation, leaving him with nothing but unanswered texts and growing dread. At first, he had clung to hope, believing that the statistics favored people their age. But the virus didn't care about hope. It stole both his parents within a week. One moment, he was a normal teenager, struggling with school assignments and balancing his growing YouTube channel on gaming content. The next, he was an orphan, alone, quarantined in a silent house that no longer felt like home. The weeks after their passing blurred into one long stretch of emptiness. The house was suffocatingly quiet, except for the occasional knock of a social worker or a neighbor offering their sympathies. But sympathy didn't bring his parents back. Sympathy didn't ease the bone-deep loneliness that crept into his soul. His relatives, those distant aunts and uncles, made their judgments quickly. None of them wanted to take in a teenager, especially not one so close to adulthood. And so, George found himself in the foster system, shuffled between homes where no one truly cared. By 18, he was on his own. He poured himself into his work as a gaming content creator, building a modest online presence. His channel, Pixel Phantom, had a dedicated following. He spent hours live streaming RPG games, analyzing mechanics, and engaging with his virtual audience. It was the only time he didn't feel alone, but even that couldn't fill the void completely. Despite his internet fame, his real-life connections were few. He had no close friends, no family to check in on him. His days were spent inside his small apartment, illuminated only by the glow of his computer screen. Sometimes, he would go an entire day without speaking a single word aloud. It wasn't a bad life, just an empty one. And yet, in a way, George had accepted it. Until the day everything changed. It was raining that night. The streets were slick with water, the neon signs of the city reflecting in shallow puddles. George had just finished a late grocery run, his hood pulled up against the cold drizzle, when he heard it, a child's cry. He turned sharply, spotting a little girl barely 3 years old, standing dangerously close to the edge of the road. Her tiny hands gripped a stuffed bear, her wide eyes filled with confusion as she sobbed. And then, in the distance, headlights. George didn't think. He ran. The next few seconds felt like slow motion. His feet splashed against the wet pavement. The girl turned to him just as the truck's horn blared. George lunged forward, his arm scooping her up in one swift motion before he twisted, shoving her out of harm's way. Impact. Pain exploded through his body. A brutal force slammed into his side, knocking the breath from his lungs. The world tilted, spinning wildly before everything came to an abrupt stop. He lay there, rain mingling with something warm and thick pooling beneath him. His body refused to move. Distantly, he heard people shouting, footsteps rushing toward him. The child was safe. That was all that mattered. His vision blurred. His last thought? I hope there's something more. Then darkness. When he opened his eyes, he knew something was wrong. His first instinct was that he had somehow survived. But as the haze lifted from his mind, confusion quickly replaced pain. He wasn't lying on the wet pavement anymore. Instead, he was in a dimly lit room, resting on a stiff mattress. Thick, musty curtains hung around the bed, casting eerie shadows in the flickering candlelight. His fingers twitched. His hands felt different, thinner, paler. His breathing quickened as he slowly sat up, heart hammering. His body felt off, not just injured, but wrong. He reached up, brushing his fingers through his hair, and froze. Long, greasy. That wasn't his hair. A creeping sense of dread filled his chest as he swung his legs off the bed, standing shakily. His vision swam for a moment before clearing. His gaze landed on a mirror across the room. The reflection staring back at him was not his own. It was a boy, tall, lanky, with sallow skin and a hooked nose. His black robes hung loosely over his thin frame, and his dark eyes held something deep, something wounded. Recognition slammed into him like a freight train. This was Hogwarts. And he was Severus Snape. The realization sent him stumbling backward, gripping the edge of the bed for support. His mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the impossible. This had to be a dream, a coma-induced hallucination. Yet, the memories weren't his own. Flashes of childhood, Spinner's End, the murky river, his mother's quiet warnings, his father's drunken shouts. Meeting Lily Evans for the first time, the way her green eyes had lit up when she did her first bit of accidental magic. The warmth of their friendship. Then, the fight. The cruel word that had escaped his lips in a moment of anger. The look of betrayal on her face as she turned away. His chest tightened. These weren't just images. They were memories. Feelings. A lifetime embedded in his mind as if they had always belonged to him. But they hadn't. Because he wasn't Severus Snape. He was George Paddington. Or at least, he had been. The weight of it all crashed over him. Somehow, impossibly, he had died in his world and woken up in this one. A sudden chime echoed in his mind, cutting through his thoughts like a knife. System activated. Welcome, host. Initiating integration. George, or rather, Severus, stared at the floating text before him. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. A glowing interface hovered before his eyes. George, or rather, Severus, blinked. The words shimmered in the dim candlelight, their letters shifting and reforming as if alive. System activated. Welcome, host. Initializing connection to host consciousness. Integration complete. He rubbed his temples. The lingering ache in his head felt like the worst gaming marathon-induced migraine he'd ever had. A soft, mechanical voice spoke directly into his mind, crisp and devoid of emotion. Hello, host. My name is Eva, your system assistant. I am here to facilitate your adaptation to this world. My functions will provide guidance, missions, and resources to assist in your survival and growth. His survival? That sent a fresh wave of unease through him. Severus, no, George had consumed enough fantasy stories and played enough Transmigration RPGs to recognize what this was. He had a system, and systems always came with strings attached. He exhaled slowly. All right, Eva, give me a full breakdown of your functions. The interface adjusted, expanding into several categories. System functions, mission allocation. Missions will be generated based on host decisions, interactions, and significant events. Major story-altering actions will directly influence mission difficulty and rewards. Main mission, non-negotiable, rewrite the fate of Severus Snape. Side missions, dynamic, evolving based on choices. Bonus missions, time-limited opportunities for additional rewards. Skill enhancement, host can accumulate skill points, SP. Through mission completion or personal growth. SP can be used to enhance magic-related abilities. Memory integration. Access to original Severus Snape's memories. Can be revisited or suppressed at will. Reputation system. Tracks standing with individuals and factions. Actions will influence social dynamics and opportunities. Severus scrolled through the details, his mind racing. The first function was the most crucial. His main mission was non-negotiable. Meaning, no matter what, he had to change Severus Snape's fate. But how far could he push that? Did he have full autonomy, or were there constraints? And what if he failed? He didn't want to find out. His eyes moved to the memory integration function. His stomach tightened. He had already felt the memories lurking in the back of his mind, raw and unfiltered. It was like holding someone else's diary. Except this diary was a lifetime of emotions, mistakes, and regrets. Eva, open my memories of Lily Evans. The interface pulsed, and then a park. Lily's laughter rang through the air, bright and carefree. A younger Severus sat beside her under a large tree, his dark eyes watching her in quiet fascination. You have to admit, Sev, she teased, grinning as she levitated a small flower in the air. I'm way better at this than you. Severus rolled his eyes but smiled. You just got lucky. She tossed her red hair dramatically. Please, I know I'm talented. A familiar warmth settled in Severus' chest. These were the good moments, when Lily was just a girl with a dazzling smile and endless enthusiasm. She made him believe, for a while, that magic could be his too, despite his filthy muggle surroundings. But then, a different memory. Hogwarts, 5th year. Lily, please. His voice cracked with desperation. He reached out for her, but she recoiled as if his touch would burn her. You called me a mudblood, Severus, she said, her green eyes blazing. That's what you really think of me, isn't it? I didn't mean it, he said hurriedly, panic creeping in. You know I didn't. She laughed bitterly. Funny how it always slips out when you're around your real friends. Severus felt his throat tighten. I don't belong with them. She hesitated, just for a second, but the anger in her gaze hardened. Then prove it. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Lily sighed, the fire in her eyes dimming into disappointment. That's what I thought, she said softly, before turning and walking away. The memory stopped. Severus inhaled sharply, gripping the sheets beneath him. Lily Evans wasn't perfect. She had always had a slight superiority complex, a habit of assuming she was right. She cared for him, but she had never fully understood him, not the way he had understood her. She had given him an impossible test, one where he had to choose between his only source of acceptance, the Slytherins, and her moral standards. It had never been a fair choice. And now, as Severus, George had a second chance. The dormitory door creaked open. Severus looked up as a tall, pale-haired figure stepped inside, his movements smooth and deliberate. Lucius Malfoy. The older boy's gray eyes landed on him immediately, assessing. Severus, Lucius said, closing the door behind him. I heard about your incident with Lily Evans. Severus stiffened. Lucius smirked slightly, crossing his arms. I'm disappointed in you, letting a mudblood wound your pride like that. The old Severus would have nodded meekly, eager for Lucius' approval. But George knew better. He met Lucius' gaze without hesitation. I wasn't weak, he said evenly. I made a mistake. That's all. Lucius arched an eyebrow. A mistake. Severus exhaled, carefully choosing his words. I let my emotions cloud my judgment. I reacted in anger. That was a weakness, and I won't let it happen again. Lucius studied him for a long moment, then smiled, a slow, approving expression. Good, he said. You're learning. Severus kept his face neutral. He needed Lucius for now. His influence in Slytherin mattered. But unlike before, he wouldn't be a blind follower. A new notification flashed before his eyes. Mission update, main mission. Rewrite the fate of Severus Snape. Progress, 3%. Side mission. Secure an influential ally. Progress, 20%. New mission. Manipulate Lucius Malfoy's trust without becoming his puppet. Severus smirked. This time, he wouldn't be the pawn. This time, he would play the game. The past was not a story told in simple lines of black and white. It was a tangled web of emotions, pain, and choices. Severus Snape had lived a life of quiet suffering, moments of warmth swallowed by darkness, with fleeting sparks of happiness dimmed by the crushing weight of reality. And now, George Paddington, once an outsider looking in, had to live it. As he lay in his dormitory bed, staring at the canopy above, he let the flood of memories wash over him. Some were comforting, others infuriating, but all were his now. His mother and father, love and disillusionment. Eileen Prince, a pure blood witch from a once great family, reduced to living in the crumbling remains of her past. Severus had always loved his mother. She was the only warmth in his otherwise bleak childhood. She had taught him the language of magic, whispered incantations in Latin when he was still too young to hold a wand properly, traced delicate symbols of ancient runes on parchment for him to decipher. But love and respect were not the same thing. His mother was weak. She had let him, Tobias Snape, win. Tobias Snape, a violent, drunken man who had no love for his son, no patience for magic, and certainly no remorse for the bruises he left behind. The memories of his father were sharp, jagged edges that tore at him like glass. The crash of breaking glass bottles. The sting of a hard slap, sending him sprawling to the floor. The bellowing voice, filled with rage, spitting out words like freak and worthless boy. Tobias Snape despised him, despised magic, and his mother, despite all her power, let it happen. Severus had once idolized her, thinking her a quiet, tragic hero trapped in a doomed marriage. But now, with the clarity of hindsight, George saw what Severus had refused to admit. Eileen had chosen this life. She had chosen to stay, chosen to bow before a man who hated her, chosen to let her son suffer instead of walking away. That was why, even though Severus had loved his mother, he had never forgiven her. And now, neither would he. The Marauders, bullies behind the golden glow. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, the Marauders. The golden boys of Gryffindor, the pranksters, the so-called heroes. To the outside world, they were charming, talented, and beloved by teachers and students alike. But Severus knew better. They were bullies. James Potter, with his endless arrogance, believed himself untouchable, always ready to humiliate someone for a laugh. He had targeted Severus from the moment they had stepped foot in Hogwarts, simply because he was an easy mark. Sirius Black, reckless and cruel, took pleasure in destroying people. His amusement was in chaos and watching others suffer under the guise of pranks. Remus Lupin, the so-called good one, the reasonable one. But his silence had been just as damning as their actions. He had never stopped them, never spoken up, because it was easier to look the other way than risk losing his friends. And Peter Pettigrew? A worm, a spineless shadow who followed wherever the power went. The memories played out, each one a bitter taste on his tongue, a jet of red light, his body flipping in the air as he was humiliated before a laughing crowd. A bottle of ink spilled over his homework, the Marauders grinning as he scrambled to salvage his parchment. The worst memory, the day James hung him upside down for the whole school to see, stripping him of dignity, reducing him to a joke. And what had been his crime? He had existed. They called it pranks. They called it fun. But bullying was bullying, and they had gotten away with it. Dumbledore, so wise and just, had turned a blind eye. McGonagall, strict and competent, had looked the other way. Even Slughorn, despite his occasional kindness, had never dared challenge the Potter name. Slytherins were seen as villains no matter what. It was expected that they would be treated as such. The injustice of it burned inside him. This time, he would not be their victim. Hogwarts and the teachers who mattered. Not all of Hogwarts had been cruel. There were those who had recognized his talent, who had, in their own way, helped him. Flitwick, the unbiased mentor, Professor Flitwick, the tiny but formidable charms master, had been one of the only teachers who treated all students fairly. Despite being head of Ravenclaw, Flitwick had never once dismissed Severus because he was a Slytherin. Instead, he had praised Severus' talent and charms, encouraging him where others had ignored him. In secret, Flitwick had trained Severus in dueling, recognizing his potential. They had spent evenings in empty classrooms, the tiny professor guiding him through advanced spell work, helping him sharpen his technique. Flitwick had believed in him, and now, Severus had no intention of letting that go to waste. Horace Slughorn, the cowardly opportunist Slughorn, was not a bad man. He had been good to Severus in some ways, recognizing his genius in potions and granting him access to rare ingredients. But Slughorn was also a man who avoided conflict. He had never defended Severus from the Marauders, never risked his reputation by standing against powerful families like the Potters or the Blacks. Instead, Slughorn had helped in small, indirect ways, favoring Severus in class, slipping him extra materials, whispering quiet words of advice. He was useful, but he was not someone Severus could rely on for protection. Minerva McGonagall, strict but biased McGonagall, was an excellent teacher, fair, but with clear favoritism toward her own house. She followed the rules precisely, unless, of course, it was one of her own breaking them. Then, it was a different story. She was not cruel, but she was not just, either. Madame Pomfrey, the quiet guardian, the Hogwarts nurse, Poppy Pomfrey, had seen his bruises, had patched him up countless times. Unlike the others, she had never dismissed his injuries as pranks. She had never told him to just stay out of their way. She had been kind. She had encouraged his potion skills, recognizing his steady hands, his talent for precision. It was she who had subtly guided him toward medical knowledge, seeing something in him that others had not. Poppy Pomfrey had cared. And now, George, Severus, understood just how few people had. Severus Snape, a genius in the shadows for all his suffering. Severus Snape had never been ordinary. His mind was razor-sharp, his knowledge vast. His potions talent was beyond prodigious. He had innovated, experimented, rewritten spells in the margins of his books. But there was more. He was skilled in ancient runes, fascinated by the power hidden in language itself. He was proficient in Latin, French, and Irish, a talent inherited from his mother's teachings. And then there was dueling, a skill he had kept hidden, a talent only Flitwick knew the extent of. Severus Snape had never been weak, but the world had made him believe he was. George closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. He had seen Severus Snape's life, felt his pain, his rage, and he had one thought. This life won't be wasted. The system chimed softly. Mission update. Main mission. Rewrite the fate of Severus Snape. Progress. 5%. Side mission. Master hidden talents before 7th year. A slow smirk formed on Severus' lips. Time to change the game. Severus knew one thing for certain. Hogwarts was Dumbledore's domain. The old man had eyes everywhere. He saw too much and let too little slip past him. If Severus, George, suddenly started behaving differently, showing talents that the previous Snape had kept hidden, or distancing himself from known figures, it would raise suspicion. That was something he could not afford. At least, not yet. So, for the time being, he would lay low. Avoidance as a strategy. The first step was avoiding the Marauders and Lily Evans. That meant cutting down any and all interactions that could lead to unnecessary confrontation. He started leaving class early, before the Marauders could corner him. As soon as a lesson ended, he packed his things quickly and slipped out of the room before they even had time to get up from their seats. He stayed within the Slytherin group. Lucius Malfoy and his crowd provided an excellent deterrent against Gryffindor aggression. While they were arrogant and bigoted, they were useful as a shield. He took different corridors to avoid running into James Potter and Sirius Black. Luckily, Hogwarts had enough twists and turns for a determined person to disappear when necessary. Lily, too, was kept at a distance. Severus knew she would not likely talk to him after their last fight, but he never gave her the chance. Whenever they shared a class, he remained silent, never looking her way, slipping out before she could catch him alone. By the end of the week, it was working. The Marauders had barely interacted with him. James and Sirius had lost interest in tormenting him. At least for now. Midnight plans, but avoidance wasn't enough. Severus needed information. He had spent the past week mapping out all the known corridors of Hogwarts, but that wasn't nearly enough. Hogwarts was an ancient castle, full of secrets even Dumbledore likely didn't know, and he knew exactly where to go to find them. The Room of Requirement. It was past midnight when Severus made his move. The Slytherin dormitory was silent, the only sounds the soft crackling of the dying fireplace. Carefully, he slipped out of bed, grabbed his wand, and cast a disillusionment charm on himself, and a silent muffliato charm over his footsteps, before stepping out of the common room. The dungeons were eerily quiet. Severus navigated the empty halls carefully, his breath slow and measured. He avoided the main staircases, sticking to lesser-used passageways to avoid running into any of the teachers. Filch, the castle's ever-irritable caretaker, was known to prowl the hallways at night. But Severus had spent enough time in detention cleaning the trophy room to know Filch's usual routes. It took him 20 minutes, but he finally arrived at the 7th floor. Standing before the blank stretch of wall, he closed his eyes, focusing. I need a place that holds everything lost in Hogwarts, hidden artifacts, forgotten knowledge, and a comprehensive map of the entire castle. He walked back and forth 3 times. And then, the wall shifted. An ancient wooden door appeared, seamlessly blending into the stone. Severus exhaled and stepped inside. The come-and-go room. The moment he entered, his breath caught. This wasn't just a storage room. This was a graveyard of lost knowledge. Towering shelves lined the walls, filled with ancient books, discarded robes, and forgotten magical artifacts. Chests of gold lay abandoned. Broken brooms leaned against stone pillars, and stacks of parchment covered in dust sat untouched for centuries. Severus' eyes flickered around, scanning the room for what he came for. A map, he reminded himself. A complete map of Hogwarts. Almost immediately, a small pedestal appeared in the center of the room. Upon it lay a large, black leather-bound book, its edges gilded in silver, the Hogwarts crest engraved onto the cover. Severus stepped forward, cautiously reaching out and flipping open the first page. Hogwarts, the complete layout by Phineas Nigellus Black. His heart pounded. Phineas Nigellus Black, the ex-headmaster of Hogwarts, ancestor of Sirius Black, and one of the most cunning Slytherin to ever exist. He turned the pages, and his breath hitched. This was not just a map. It was a comprehensive tracking system. Every hidden passage, both known and unknown, was carefully drawn out. The moving staircase's unpredictable patterns were documented. The restricted sections of the castle, including rooms that even Dumbledore likely never stepped into, were marked. A live tracking feature, tiny ink dots moved across the map, displaying the names of students and teachers, showing their locations in real time. This is what I needed. And then, as he flipped to the final pages, he saw something surprising. A smaller, incomplete version of this map was documented in a footnote. Deputy Headmaster Everett Greymore assisted in maintaining a secondary version of this map for practical use. Upon his retirement, this map was lost to the castle's archives. However, it was later retrieved and repurposed for unknown purposes. Severus' eyes narrowed. So that's where the Marauders' map came from. They had not made it themselves. They had found it, stolen from Filch's office, and modified it with their own magic. Severus clenched his fists. Fitting. They were never as clever as they thought. He snapped the book shut. Now for the rest. Sorting the hoard, Severus turned back to the mountain of items strewn across the room. He had no idea how many centuries' worth of Hogwarts' forgotten treasures lay hidden here, but there was far too much chaos. Room, sort yourself. Immediately, the air shimmered, and the clutter began to shift. Gold, galleons, and treasures stacked themselves neatly to the left. Books, scrolls, and manuscripts sorted themselves into rows, categorized by subject. Potions, charms, runes, transfiguration, and even dark arts. Clothing and robes folded themselves into neat piles. Wands, brooms, and enchanted trunks/suitcases were aligned in another corner. Magical artifacts, rings, amulets, and other unknown trinkets placed themselves on display tables. Severus took a step back, stunned at the sheer scale of what he had just uncovered. This wasn't just a treasure room. This was power. This was knowledge. And no one knew about it but him. A slow smirk curled at the edges of his lips. This is only the beginning. The system chimed softly in his mind. Mission update. Main mission. Rewrite the fate of Severus Snape. Progress. 7%. New side mission. Study and utilize the secrets of Hogwarts. Bonus mission. Decode Phineas Nigellus Black's lost notes. Severus exhaled. The night had only begun. Severus stood in the sordid room of requirement, surrounded by centuries of forgotten knowledge and treasure. The weight of his discovery settled in. This place wasn't just a goldmine of lost artifacts, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to reshape his future, to gather power in ways he had never dreamed of before. I have a head start. I need to use it wisely. He took a deep breath and focused. The first step? The map. The secrets of Hogwarts. Severus sat cross-legged on the floor, the Hogwarts map by Phineas Nigellus Black spread open before him. His dark eyes scanned every inch of the detailed schematics, absorbing the secrets hidden within. What he found was beyond even his expectations. The hidden passages. Not just the ones students knew of, but the real secret tunnels. Passages leading directly into Hogsmeade. Underground chambers even teachers had forgotten. Hidden doorways leading to parts of the castle that had been sealed for centuries. The Room of Lost Time. A space hidden beneath the castle, accessible only through a specific sequence of steps and incantations. Phineas had marked it as dangerous but invaluable. Tracking system. The Marauders' map had a crude tracking system, but Phineas' original version? It was a masterpiece. Every student, professor, and staff member was mapped out in real time, along with their movements, with one exception. The Chamber of Secrets was missing. Of course, Severus mused. Salazar Slytherin wouldn't share his secrets with Phineas Black. It didn't matter. With this map, Severus could move anywhere in Hogwarts unseen. It gave him an untouchable advantage. His fingers tightened around the edges of the parchment. I will never be at their mercy again. He folded the map carefully and placed it in his enchanted bag. Next, he turned to the sorted bookshelves. Row upon row of forgotten texts gleamed in the dim lighting. Many of these were likely banned from the restricted section, hidden here instead of being outright destroyed. Severus ran his fingers along the bindings, scanning the titles. Potions. The Alchemist's Guide to Experimental Brews, The Art of Unstable Elixirs, Blood Magic and Potion Synergy. Charms and Hexes, Beyond Standard Spell Work, Unspoken Incantations, The Theory of Wandless Magic. Ancient Runes and Warding, Lost Languages of Magic, Rune Inscription for Combat and Defense, The Forgotten Spells of the Old World. His heart pounded. This was more than what the Hogwarts library could offer. This was power. I can learn everything they never wanted me to. He plucked several books from the shelves, stacking them into a small pile, books on advanced dueling, magical theory, and forgotten enchantments. If he was going to reshape his future, he needed more than just knowledge. He needed skills. Money was power, even in the wizarding world. And Severus had just uncovered piles of gold left to gather dust. Hundreds of galleons, thousands of sickles and nuts, all abandoned by students over the centuries. Piles of old wizarding banknotes, forgotten magical objects once considered priceless. It was Hogwarts' hidden treasury, and now it belonged to him. Severus picked up a small leather bag and whispered, "Undetectable extension charm." The bag shimmered. One by one, he transferred the gold and rare artifacts inside, filling it with as much as he could carry. With this, he wouldn't have to rely on anyone. Not Lucius Malfoy, not even Slughorn. He could buy his own books, his own ingredients, his own tools, all without anyone suspecting a thing. Independence. Finally, Severus turned toward the section where abandoned wands and magical equipment had been gathered. Most wands wouldn't work for him. Wands were deeply personal, bound by the connection between wizard and magic. But there was one exception: runic wands. Runic wands had self-adjusting cores, capable of bonding with multiple users. They were rare, but they had been used by older magical civilizations. And here, among the discarded wands, was one such artifact. A blackthorn wand, with ancient silver runes etched along its length. Its grip was made of obsidian, polished and smooth. Severus lifted it carefully. The moment his fingers touched the wand, a strange, warm pulse ran through his palm. It wasn't loyalty like a normal wand. It was recognition. This will do. He slid it into his robe. Among the magical artifacts, he found a finely crafted broom, better than the school's standard models, and an enchanted trunk, fitted with protective spells and a multi-compartment storage system. Perfect. As Severus secured his findings, a soft chime echoed in his mind. Mission update. Main mission. Rewrite the fate of Severus Snape. Progress. 10%. Side mission. Master lost knowledge. Progress. 15%. Bonus mission. Gather 500 galleons in secret wealth. Progress. 40%. New bonus mission. Bond with a runic wand. Progress. 5%. Severus smirked. He was making progress. With these resources, he was no longer just another student in Hogwarts. He was a shadow within the castle, unseen, untouchable, and soon, unstoppable. Severus took a final look at the room of requirement, his mind buzzing with the possibilities this place offered. There was still more to uncover, but for now, he had everything he needed. With one last glance at the towering shelves of forgotten magic, he whispered, "Close." The door vanished, sealing the room behind him. He stepped into the empty corridor, the castle silent in the dead of night. With the map secured, gold hidden, and knowledge in his grasp, Severus Snape began his journey back to the Slytherin dormitory. His real journey, the one where he controlled his own fate, had just begun. Severus Snape had always played by Hogwarts rules. That ended now. For years, he had held back, forced to stay within the confines of expectations, both from the Slytherin house and the wider wizarding world. But if he wanted true freedom, if he wanted to rewrite his fate, then he had to plan. And this time, he wouldn't just survive, he would thrive. The room of requirement. A hoard to claim. Severus leaned against the cool stone wall of the Slytherin dormitory, his mind already racing. The room of requirement was a treasure trove, and now that he had discovered its true potential, he couldn't just leave it be. He had to take everything. By the end of the year, it will all be mine. That was the deadline. Once he finished his OWLs, he would have significantly more freedom. He wouldn't be tied to strict schedules, nor under constant teacher surveillance. It was the perfect opportunity to start making moves. But there was a problem. He was still a minor. The wizarding world was still stuck in the past, governed by bloodlines, wealth, and status. Most young witches and wizards were bound to their families' wishes until they were legally considered adults at 17. That would not work for him. He had to be free before that. If emancipation was possible, it would grant him complete control over his finances. No one, not even Hogwarts or the Ministry, could monitor his bank accounts. Legal autonomy. No one could force him into an apprenticeship or control his movements. Independence to travel and study beyond Hogwarts. Gringotts will have the answers. He would visit the bank the moment summer began, open a private account, store all his gold, books, and artifacts, and request inheritance tests. Who knew what rights he had hidden in his bloodline? Self-improvement, strength and transformation. Severus knew his greatest weakness wasn't his magic. It was his body. Years of poor nutrition, stress, and lack of proper care had left him thin, pale, and physically weak. His face was drawn, his skin sallow, his posture hunched, all traits that made him look more like a target than a threat. That had to change, but doing it during the school year would raise too many questions. Instead, he would prepare everything now and undergo the transformation during summer. The plan? Physical enhancement rituals. Ancient magic could enhance the body, improving strength, agility, and endurance. He already had books on ritual magic from the Room of Requirement. Potions for physical health. He would brew blood-replenishing potions, nutrient-rich tonics, and strengthening elixirs to correct years of malnutrition. Posture and movement training. No more slouching, no more defensive, withdrawn body language. He would train himself to command presence. Appearance correction. Hair, teeth, skin, all fixable through potions and minor magical procedures. It wouldn't be an overnight change, but by the time the next school year began, he would be unrecognizable. No longer the shadow of Slytherin House. No longer the boy they could push around. Priority list. The road to mastery. Severus reached for a piece of parchment and began writing down his priorities. 1. The OWLs. No more holding back. Severus had spent years suppressing his full intelligence, hiding his true skill to avoid unwanted attention. That stops now. For the OWLs, he would dominate every subject: potions, charms, transfiguration, runes, dark arts theory, defense against the dark arts. Prove himself as the top student, surpassing even the Marauders and Lily Evans. Secure favor with the professors who actually mattered: McGonagall, Flitwick, and even Slughorn. Let Dumbledore watch. Let the Marauders seethe. It was time to show them who Severus Snape truly was. 2. Additional OWL exams. Expand his expertise. Why stop at standard OWLs? The Ministry allowed students to take extra OWLs at the Ministry during the summer if they registered in advance. Most students didn't bother because it was too much work, but Severus was not most students. He listed the extra exams he would register for. Muggle studies, an easy win for a half-blood. Knowing both worlds gave him an advantage. Care of magical creatures. Years of self-study had given him knowledge most students lacked, especially in harvesting potion ingredients from magical creatures. Dueling. Taught secretly by Flitwick, this would validate his skill. Basic healing. Thanks to Pomfrey's encouragement, he already knew more than the average healer in training. Languages. Proficiency in Latin, French, and Irish would add to his qualifications. Once he aced these OWLs, he would be years ahead of his peers. 3. Gringotts. Securing his future. His first stop after Hogwarts ended would be Gringotts. The goblins valued privacy, wealth, and power, 3 things he intended to use. His plans at the bank. Open a private vault. A vault only he could access, separate from any accounts Hogwarts or the Ministry could track. Deposit his wealth. Store all the gold, rare books, and magical artifacts he had collected so far. Request an inheritance test. If there were hidden bloodline connections, this would reveal them. Who knew what magical legacies he might uncover? Ask about emancipation. If there was a legal way to free himself from wizarding guardianship, he needed to know. Once he had control over his own finances, he would be untouchable. The plan was set. He would conquer the OWLs and take additional subjects. He would secure his wealth and legal independence. He would undergo physical and magical enhancements to remake himself. He would clear the room of requirements treasure before the year ended. And then he would change the wizarding world on his own terms. The Marauders wouldn't know what hit them. Dumbledore would no longer have a pawn to manipulate. Lucius Malfoy and his pure-blood associates would see him as a power in his own right, not a follower. The next time someone looked at Severus Snape, they wouldn't see the bullied Slytherin. They would see someone far more dangerous. Someone in control. The system chimed in his mind. Mission update, main mission. Rewrite the fate of Severus Snape. Progress. 15%. New side mission. Register for additional OWLs. Progress. 5%. New side mission. Secure emancipation information. Progress. 10%. Bonus mission. Transfer room of requirements wealth. Progress. 3%. A slow smirk formed on Severus' lips. It begins now. Severus Snape had disappeared. Not physically. He still attended every class, still moved through the castle halls, still existed within Hogwarts walls. But socially, he had become a phantom. He spoke only when necessary, engaged with no one, and left no openings for anyone to interfere with his life. His focus was singular. Study, prepare, master, escape. For weeks, Severus devoted himself to absolute academic excellence. He pored over advanced potion theories, experimenting during late-night study sessions in the Slytherin common room. He perfected his charms work, pushing his spell control to higher levels under the guise of harmless exercises. He practiced dueling sequences in secret, using the abandoned classrooms Flitwick had shown him. He memorized entire passages from healing textbooks, revisiting everything he had learned from Madame Pomfrey. He revised runes and languages, reading through old magical texts, refining his skill with Latin, French, and Irish. Nothing else mattered. Even within Slytherin, he was a shadow. Lucius Malfoy had noticed. Lily Evans had noticed. The Marauders had noticed. And they were all watching. Lucius Malfoy's POV. Lucius Malfoy prided himself on his ability to control situations. Severus Snape had always been a useful asset, sharp-minded, resourceful, and easy to guide. But now he was different. He was no longer the boy who followed in their footsteps, clinging to the protection of Slytherin's elite. He was silent, focused, distant, not out of resentment or fear, but something else, something far more dangerous. Lucius had watched Severus slip away from the Slytherin circle, retreating into an isolated world of ruthless self-improvement. Whatever he was planning, it was meticulous. And Lucius Malfoy did not like being left in the dark. You're up to something, Severus. I wonder what it is. Lily Evans' POV. Lily didn't know what to think anymore. She had spent months expecting Severus to apologize, to make some kind of effort to fix their broken friendship. But he had vanished instead. She barely saw him anymore, except during classes, and even then, he was gone the moment the lesson ended. It was as if he had erased himself from their world. No more arguing. No more sneering remarks. No more Severus Snape. And for some infuriating reason, she missed him. Why'd I even care? He made his choice. But as she watched him excel effortlessly in every subject, outperforming even her, she felt something strange. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was uncertainty. What are you doing, Severus? James Potter's POV. James Potter didn't like this new Snape. The old Severus had been easy to provoke, always ready to snap at an insult, always so pathetically defensive. But now, Snape ignored them completely. No glares, no snide remarks, no fury-filled insults. Just cold indifference. And that made James furious. He thinks he's better than us. Thinks he can just brush everything off like we don't matter. For the first time, James wasn't sure who was winning their little war. And he hated it. Sirius Black's POV. Sirius Black had spent years tormenting Snape because it was fun. The greasy git had always been so miserable, so defensive, so easy to wind up. But now he had changed. Sirius didn't like it. It felt like Snape was planning something, like he was playing a game no one else knew the rules to. And that made Sirius uneasy. Seeking summer opportunities, Severus knew he couldn't return to Spinner's Inn for the summer. That place was not his home. It was a prison, and he would rather sleep in the streets than spend another second under Tobias Snape's roof. So he needed a plan. On a Friday evening, he approached Professor Flitwick after class. "Professor," he said evenly, "I was wondering if you knew of any summer internships or work opportunities for students." Flitwick raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That depends, my boy. What are you looking for?" "Something that provides accommodation," Severus said carefully. "Even a basic living arrangement will do." Flitwick frowned slightly, but nodded. "I'll see if I can find something for you, Severus," he said. "It's good to see you thinking ahead." The real help, however, came from Madame Pomfrey. The next morning, she pulled him aside after breakfast. "I heard you were looking for summer work," she said, arms crossed. Severus nodded. "I have a friend who owns a potion shop in Diagon Alley," she continued. "She's looking for a capable assistant, someone who knows their way around ingredients, who can help in basic brewing and organization. The shop provides accommodation for 3 months." Severus' heart leaped. This was perfect. "I'll take it," he said immediately. Pomfrey gave him a small, approving nod. "I'll write to her with my recommendation," she said. "You've always been one of the most talented potion students I've treated." For the first time in years, Severus felt genuine gratitude towards someone. "Thank you," he said sincerely. The next few weeks were brutal. Severus barely ate, barely slept, pushing himself to study harder than ever before. And when the exams arrived, he excelled. But no one knew it. Potions, flawless execution. Even Slughorn was forced to acknowledge that Severus was on par with the best brewers in Britain. Charms, perfect spell control. Flitwick gave him a rare nod of approval. Transfiguration, difficult, but manageable. Ancient runes, perfect translations. Defense against the dark arts, practically effortless. His scores were only known to the exam proctors, Hogwarts teachers, and the visiting officials from the Ministry of Education, including Griselda Marchbanks, the governor of the Wizarding Examinations Authority. The results would be sent by Owlpost during the summer. Until then, no one would suspect a thing. The school year ended, and Severus boarded the Hogwarts Express, leaving behind the castle that had been both his prison and his battlefield. This time, when the train pulled into King's Cross Station, he didn't feel dread. He felt free. Arriving at the potions shop the moment Severus stepped into Brew and Bloom Apothecary, he felt at home. The air was thick with the scent of dried herbs, bubbling potions, and crushed ingredients. Wooden shelves stretched to the ceiling, lined with glass vials of shimmering liquids and jars filled with rare magical components. Behind the polished wooden counter stood a middle-aged witch with sharp green eyes, her curly brown hair pulled back into a bun. Severus knew her immediately, Doria Langston, the woman Madame Pomfrey had recommended him to. She eyed him carefully, wiping her hands on her apron. "So," she said, voice crisp, "You're Severus Snape?" "Yes." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Poppy spoke highly of you. Said you were one of the most promising potion students she's ever seen." Severus inclined his head. "I take my craft seriously." "Good," Doria said, narrowing her eyes slightly. "Let's see if you're as skilled as she says." She walked around the counter and motioned for him to follow. The back room was a fully stocked brewing lab. Multiple cauldrons, ingredient racks organized by potency, and a stone workstation already set up. "Brew me a wound-cleansing draft." "No instructions. No guides. You have 15 minutes. A test." Severus merely rolled up his sleeves and set to work. His hands moved automatically, years of brewing experience kicking in. He measured the ingredients precisely, heated the cauldron to the perfect temperature, and stirred in the crushed Didney leaves at the exact moment the potion needed stabilization. By the time 15 minutes passed, the pale green draft shimmered perfectly in the cauldron. Doria examined the potion, took a small sample with a dropper, and let a single drop land on a burn mark on her forearm. The wound closed instantly. She let out a satisfied huff. "Well," she said, setting the dropper down, "looks like I won't regret hiring you after all." Severus merely smirked. A letter to his mother. After settling into his small rented room above the shop, Severus sat at the modest wooden desk and pulled out parchment and ink. His mother had a right to know where he was staying. He dipped his quill into the ink and began writing. "Mother, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to inform you that I will be spending my summer working at Brew and Bloom Apothecary in Diagon Alley. Madame Pomfrey arranged this opportunity for me, and the shop provides accommodation, so there is no need to worry about my whereabouts. I would like to meet you, if possible. However, it is crucial that Father does not know where I am. If you can visit Diagon Alley, send me a return letter so we can arrange a time." There are things I need to discuss with you. Severus, he folded the letter neatly, sealing it before handing it off to the shopsell service. With that done, he turned to his real priority, Gringotts. A visit to Gringotts, the Gringotts Bank, was as imposing as ever: massive white marble pillars, goblins with sharp suits and sharper smiles, and a level of security unmatched by any wizarding institution. Severus stepped up to the main desk where a goblin with piercing black eyes and long silver nails sat. "I would like to request an inheritance test and a comprehensive medical examination," Severus said, his voice measured. The goblin raised an eyebrow but motioned him forward. "This way," the goblin said, leading him to a private office deep within the bank. A sleek silver bowl with intricate runes carved along the rim sat in the middle of the room. "Place your hand over the bowl, young wizard," the goblin instructed. "A drop of blood will suffice." Severus pulled a silver dagger from the stand beside the bowl and made a quick nick on his palm. A single drop of crimson blood fell into the liquid inside. The bowl glowed gold, and letters began forming above it. Magical Heritage and Bloodline Report. Primary heir, Severus Tobias Snape. Blood status, half-blood paternal lineage. The most ancient and most noble house of Shafik. Sacred 28. Snape, squib line, maternal lineage. The ancient and noble house of Prince, noble house, non-sacred 28. Titles and claims. Heir presumptive to the most ancient and most noble house of Shafik. Status, extinct house. Secondary heir to the ancient and noble house of Prince. Severus stared at the glowing words, his mind reeling. The Shafik family, one of the most ancient and most noble houses, an old pure-blood dynasty of the Sacred 28. What in Merlin's name, his father, Tobias Snape, had always been a muggle, or so Severus had thought. But according to this test, his paternal grandfather had been a squib, the rightful heir to the Shafik family who had been cast out when his lack of magic was discovered. The title had then passed to the younger brother, who had died in Germany during the Grindelwald War. The House of Shafik had been considered inactive ever since. But when Severus was born, the family became active again. He was the only living descendant. If I had taken this test at 11, I would have known years ago. The goblin in charge gave him a knowing look. Per ministry regulations, Gringotts cannot reach out to potential heirs of extinct houses unless they request it themselves, the goblin said smoothly. Severus inwardly sneered. Another way to keep half-bloods and muggleborns from claiming what is rightfully theirs. This was about power, about ensuring that pure-blood dynasties never fell into the hands of those they deemed unworthy. And his father, a squib rejected from his own family, had likely known something about the magical world before meeting his mother. That explained a lot. The hate, the resentment. Severus had something his father never did. "I need to speak with my mother." Severus turned his eyes to the next part of the report. The ancient and noble house of Prince was not one of the Sacred 28, but it was still considered a powerful noble lineage, one with strong magical roots. And according to the records, his mother had been reinstated into the family after his grandfather's death. So my uncle reinstated her. His uncle, Arcturus Prince, was the current lord of the House of Prince. And as per the bloodline laws, Severus was the secondary heir, meaning he came after his cousin in succession. Why did mother never reach out to him? Why did she live in poverty when she had a family willing to take her back? There were too many questions. Severus needed answers. Severus sat in the private office of Gringotts, his fingers pressed against the cool surface of the inheritance report that had shattered everything he thought he knew about himself. Heir to the most ancient and most noble house of Shafik. His bloodline, which he had thought tainted and insignificant in the eyes of wizarding society, was far from it. His grandfather had been the rightful heir, exiled due to his squib status, leaving the family dormant until Severus was born. The goblin across from him, Ragnarok, regarded him with keen golden eyes, an amused glint in his sharp features. "As per the traditions of your house," Ragnarok intoned, "you must claim the heir's ring. However, be warned, the family magic must accept you. If it does not, the ring will reject you, and you will have no right to the Shafik name." Severus narrowed his eyes but nodded. Understood. Ragnarok reached into a small, ancient chest that had been sealed with powerful goblin magic. The air hummed as the lid was lifted, revealing a ring, elegantly crafted, set with a dark blue gemstone so deep it looked like the midnight sky. The Shafik heir's ring. It floated from the chest, shimmering with ancient power. Severus reached for it. "The moment you wear this ring," Ragnarok warned, Your entire being will be tested. The Shafik family magic is potent, and it has been dormant for decades. It will not be gentle. Severus did not hesitate. He slid the ring onto his finger. The moment the band touched his skin, a sudden glow erupted from the gemstone, casting the room in a soft, eerie blue light. The metal shrank, adjusting itself to fit his finger perfectly. Severus had only a second to register the sensation before pain. Agony exploded through his entire body. A fire, unlike anything he had ever felt, burned through his veins as raw ancestral magic surged into him. He barely had time to scream before his vision darkened, and he collapsed onto the cold floor. A trial of fire, the pain was all-consuming. Every nerve, every bone, every drop of blood in his body felt like it was being torn apart and reforged. It wasn't like the Cruciatus curse. This was worse. This was power, legacy, and an entire magical lineage awakening inside him after generations of dormancy. His mind blurred, drowning in memories that weren't his own. Visions of the Shafik ancestors, wizards and witches of immense power and wealth, flickered before his eyes. Traders, scholars, duelists, potion masters, each one leaving their mark across history. He saw their hands crafting enchanted artifacts, their voices sealing deals across the world, their eyes, all the same indigo black color, the mark of the Shafik bloodline. And then, a final searing pulse surged through him. With a choked gasp, Severus snapped back to reality. The pain was gone. He lay on the cold stone floor, drenched in sweat, his body shaking violently. Breathing heavily, he slowly pushed himself onto his hands and knees. Something felt different. He looked at his reflection in the polished goblin silver. His eyes. They were no longer the dark black of Eileen Prince. Now, they shimmered indigo black, the unmistakable eye color of the Shafik bloodline. Ragnarok watched with mild approval. The magic has accepted you. You are now the rightful heir of the most ancient and most noble house of Shafik. Severus clenched his newly strengthened fingers, feeling the power coursing through his veins. This was his bloodline, his legacy, and he would use it well. Healing the scars of the past still aching, Severus forced himself to stand and turned back to Ragnarok. I want my medical examination done now, he rasped, his voice still rough from the ordeal. Ragnarok inclined his head and signaled for a Gringotts healer to enter. A goblin healer, dressed in fine silver robes, stepped inside and gestured toward the enchanted chair in the corner. Sit. Severus obeyed. A cool blue light washed over him as the healer conducted the examination. After several minutes, the goblin huffed. Malnourished. Lingering internal damage from past injuries. Stunted magical reserves due to improper care during childhood. Severus had expected that. The goblin reached into a locked cabinet and retrieved several vials. For a premium price, we can fix all of these issues immediately, the healer stated bluntly. Are you willing to pay? Severus nodded. Do it. One by one, he drank the potions. His body shuddered as the magic worked instantly. Muscles strengthened, bones reinforced, his entire magical core expanded. The damage done by years of neglect, starvation, and injuries was finally erased. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. The path to emancipation. Severus took a deep breath and refocused. I want to request the emancipation process for minors. Ragnarok handed him a set of forms. To gain full control of your inheritance before the age of 17, the goblin explained, a minor must submit a request for magical emancipation. This requires the signature of their magical guardian, which, in your case, would be your mother. Severus stared at the parchment. If his mother signed these forms, he would gain full independence, free from Tobias Snape's authority, Hogwarts restrictions, and ministry oversight. He would be his own master. I need to convince her. He folded the forms and stored them in his robes. A vault of his own. Severus looked at the goblin once more. I want to open a personal vault in my name. Ragnarok inclined his head. For what purpose? To secure and manage my private finances. Ragnarok studied him for a moment before nodding. Very well. A ledger appeared, and Severus quickly filled out the necessary forms, ensuring his new vault was entirely under his control, separate from any house-related finances. Once completed, he withdrew a sizable deposit from his pouch, gold, jewelry, and a collection of rare magical items he had gathered. Ragnarok didn't question the source of his wealth. Goblins never cared where the money came from, only that it was placed in their vaults. With that, Severus ensured that his financial independence was secured. His future was now his to shape, and his rise had only just begun. Severus sat in the dimly lit Gringotts' office, his fingers tapping lightly against the polished wooden desk. The weight of the Shafik heir's ring felt foreign but right on his hand. Across from him, Ragnarok observed him with sharp golden eyes, his expression unreadable. "You requested to meet with the Shafik family's accounts manager," Ragnarok said smoothly. Severus inclined his head. "Yes, I want to begin investing." Ragnarok smirked, clearly pleased with his initiative. "Very well, Heir Shafik. How do you wish to proceed?" Severus leaned forward. "Take 10% of the total gold from my family vault and invest it in promising business ventures, potions industries, artifact manufacturing, wand making, and any other sector with strong future returns." Ragnarok's eyes gleamed with interest. "A bold move. And your expectations?" "I expect discretion and efficiency. My profits are to be reinvested automatically unless I say otherwise." Ragnarok folded his hands together. "And Gringotts' cut?" Severus smirked. 8% of my net profits." Ragnarok's brow arched. 10%. The two locked eyes in silence. Severus considered his options. 8% was a fair offer, but Gringotts was known for prioritizing its high-value clients. If he pushed too hard, the goblins might offer him less favorable terms in the future. "Agreed," Severus said smoothly. Ragnarok inclined his head. "It will be done. Expect your first quarterly report within 3 months." The changes in his appearance, Severus walked through the streets of Diagon Alley, feeling different. His reflection in shop windows was unfamiliar. His features were still recognizably himself, but refined. The family magic of the Shafiks had altered him subtly, but significantly. His once plain black eyes now shimmered with deep indigo, the signature trait of the Shafik bloodline. His skin had lost its sickly sallow hue, becoming slightly paler, but with a healthy glow. His hair was thicker and more manageable, still black, but now with a slight sheen instead of its usual dull, greasy appearance. His posture had shifted, stronger, more confident, as if the magic had reinforced his very core. His magical presence felt denser, more powerful. Magic now responded to him with more ease than ever before. He wasn't just Severus Snape anymore. He was Heir Severus Shafik. Despite his newfound independence, there were 2 people in Hogwarts he trusted. Taking a seat in his rented room above Brew and Bloom Apothecary, Severus pulled out 2 separate parchments and began writing. "Professor Flitwick, I hope this letter finds you well. There are certain changes in my circumstances that I wish to inform you about. I recently discovered that I am the rightful heir to the most ancient and most noble house of Shafik. The details surrounding my inheritance are still unfolding, but I wanted you to know before the news inevitably reaches the public. For now, I ask that you keep this information confidential. Severus Madame Pomfrey, I hope you are well. I am writing to inform you that I have recently claimed my inheritance and have been recognized as the heir of the Shafik family. This will undoubtedly change my position within the wizarding world, and I am still adjusting to the implications. For now, I ask for your discretion regarding this matter." Severus sent the letters through the apothecary's private owl service and waited. Pomfrey's POV. Madame Pomfrey was in her office when the owl dropped Severus' letter onto her desk. She read through it twice. Then a third time. She sat back, hands folded. Heir to the Shafik family. She had always known Severus was different, brilliant, resourceful, but always struggling against something unseen. Now it all made sense. But what struck her most was that he trusted her enough to tell her. She would honor that trust. With a nod to herself, she tucked the letter into a locked cabinet. She would watch over him from afar. Flitwick's POV. Phileas Flitwick was pleasantly surprised when an owl landed in his office with a letter from Severus Snape. By the time he finished reading, his usually jovial expression had turned serious. The heir of Shafik. Flitwick knew the power that came with such a title. The Shafik family was one of the most respected and wealthiest of the Sacred 28. The fact that Severus had uncovered this without external assistance was a testament to his intelligence and determination. Flitwick smiled to himself. Perhaps Hogwarts had been underestimating Severus Snape all along. Meeting with his mother 2 days later, Severus entered the leaky cauldron, spotting his mother at a corner table. She looked older than he remembered, her once sharp features softened by fatigue and regret. She looked up, and for a moment, froze at the sight of him. Your eyes. Severus sat across from her. The Shafik magic accepted me. Eileen swallowed. So, I know that my father is a squib, that he was the true heir of Shafik before he was cast out. Eileen flinched. I never told you because I was ashamed. Severus' jaw clenched. Why didn't you reach out to your own family? Eileen looked away. I thought they abandoned me. I never knew they reinstated me. Severus inhaled sharply. You let us live in squalor, thinking you had nowhere to turn. Tears pricked at her eyes. I made mistakes, Severus. For the first time, Severus saw not just his mother, but a woman full of regrets. He could hate her for it, or he could move forward. After a long pause, he exhaled. I need you to sign my emancipation forms. Eileen blinked at him, stunned, and then slowly. She shook her head. If I sign these, I lose you forever. Severus sighed. Mother, you lost me the moment you let us suffer for a man who hated both of us. She clenched her fists. I was scared. You still are. Severus cut in, his voice softer now. But you don't have to be anymore. You have family. She looked up. What do you mean? Reach out to Arcturus, Prince. You have a place there. Eileen swallowed, considering. Finally, she took a deep breath. All right. She picked up the quill, hesitated for a moment longer, then signed the papers. Severus exhaled. It was done. His future was his own. Eileen Prince had always been a proud woman. Once, she had been raised in the ancient and noble house of Prince, a family that valued intellect, ambition, and tradition. But unlike many pure-blood girls of her time, she had been more interested in alchemy, potions, and the intricacies of magic than in society and marriage prospects. She had once been considered a rising star among potion masters, admired for her keen mind and delicate craftsmanship. And then, she had thrown it all away. For him. For Severus Snape. She had told herself it was love, at first. That he had been different from the stiff, cold, pure-blood men she had met at family gatherings. That he was passionate, unrestrained, a man who challenged her in ways no one else had. But passion was not the same as love. It had taken less than a year of marriage for that lesson to sink in. At first, Tobias had merely been frustrated with her. He struggled to find work, hated that the world was changing around him, hated that he was just another nobody in a system that crushed men like him underfoot. Then came the resentment. The muttered words of freak, the way his jealousy twisted into anger every time she did something he couldn't understand. And then came the violence. Not all at once. Slowly. Subtly. A slap here. A broken glass there. A shove into the wall. She told herself it wasn't as bad as it could be. That it was her fault for pushing too hard, for reminding him of what he lacked. And when Severus was born, she had clung to the hope that a child would fix everything. That Tobias would see his son and find something to love. Instead, he saw his own failure reflected in the boy's existence. And Eileen had stood by, frozen in fear, as her son suffered under the same hands that had once held her with love. She had wanted to leave, 100 times over. But where would she go? Her father had cast her out for marrying a muggle. She had believed herself disgraced, alone, unworthy of returning to her family's home. And so she had stayed, because she knew no other path. And now, Severus sat across from her in the leaky cauldron, looking like a prince of old, his posture straight, his presence commanding, his once dull eyes now shimmering with the deep indigo of the Shafik bloodline. Her son had risen beyond the life she had doomed him to. And he had done it without her. She could barely look at him without feeling ashamed. She had dreaded this conversation the moment she read his letter. Severus had always been sharp, far too intelligent for his own good. But she had never imagined he would unearth the truth of his lineage, claim it, and transform himself into something far beyond what she had ever been. She barely recognized him. And when he pulled out the emancipation forms, her heart clenched painfully. If I sign these, she said, voice trembling, I lose you forever. For years, she had been the only constant in his life, even if she had failed him. If she signed these papers, she would have no claim over him anymore. He would be gone, truly and legally. It would be as though he had never been her son at all. A final plea. Severus' black and indigo gaze held her in place. You lost me the moment you let us suffer for a man who hated both of us, he said, voice calm but sharp. Eileen flinched, but she didn't look away. I was scared. You still are, Severus stated, softer now. But you don't have to be anymore. You have family. She blinked. What do you mean? He leaned forward, voice firm. Arcturus Prince reinstated you into the family after grandfather died. You could have gone home at any time. Eileen's breath caught in her throat. She had spent years believing she had no one left, that the name Prince had been forever stripped from her. But Arcturus, her brother, had welcomed her back? Severus' voice softened. Reach out to him, mother. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the quill. Could she? Could she truly return to the family she had abandoned? And yet, as she looked at her son, the man he was becoming, she knew she could not cling to the past anymore. She had failed too many times already. With a shaky breath, she picked up the quill and, with one last glance at Severus, signed the emancipation forms. The moment the ink dried, she felt it, the legal severance of her parental authority. Her son was no longer bound to her. Tears burned in her eyes. Severus. His expression remained unreadable. You can still be my mother, if you choose to. Eileen swallowed hard, clutching the signed papers. I'll write to Arcturus, she whispered. I promise. For the first time in years, Severus nodded at her in approval. Perhaps this wasn't the end of everything. Perhaps it was a new beginning. Severus had always been driven by an intense need to prove himself, but now, after discovering his inheritance, securing his independence, and reclaiming his future, his motivation had reached new heights. The ministry's summer OWL examinations were known for being far more challenging than Hogwarts. Unlike the school exams, which allowed students the comfort of familiar classrooms and teachers who knew their strengths, the ministry exams were completely objective. The proctors were unforgiving, the environment sterile and devoid of favoritism, and the expectations uncompromising. He had registered for Muggle Studies, an easy pass, considering his half-blood background. Care of magical creatures, years of self-study had prepared him well. Dueling. His secret lessons with Flitwick were about to be tested. Basic healing. Madame Pomfrey's guidance had given him a solid foundation. Languages. Latin, French, and Irish, all subjects he had mastered in private. His daily routine became rigid. Mornings, 3 hours of intense study before work. Afternoons, brewing and assisting at the shop, refining his potion-making skills. Evenings, reviewing theory, practicing spell work in secret, and preparing for the exams. Unlike Hogwarts, where bias and house politics dictated success, the ministry exams would be based on merit alone. And Severus Snape had never feared competition. At first, Doria Langston had been indifferent to Severus. He was just another assistant, hired on Pomfrey's recommendation. She had little patience for incompetence, and her teaching style was brutal, far stricter than Slughorn's lazy, indulgent approach. The first few days had been exhausting. Severus had barely met her standards, and she made no effort to soften her criticism. Too much powdered bicorn horn, and you'll destabilize the entire batch, she snapped, watching as he adjusted his measurements. But Severus wasn't fragile. Unlike Slughorn's students, who relied on connections and charm, he relied on skill and intelligence. Within a week, he had mastered her brewing methods, moving with efficient precision around the shop, correcting minor mistakes before they became disasters, and demonstrating a level of skill that left even Doria silent. One evening, after they finished a difficult batch of blood-replenishing potion, Doria leaned against the counter and regarded him with a smirk. You learn quickly, she admitted. Severus wiped his hands on his apron. I don't see the point of making the same mistake twice. She gave a short laugh. You're going to be dangerous one day, Severus Snape. He met her gaze without hesitation. Good. From that day forward, she became more than just a supervisor, she became a mentor. She taught him about business, potion innovation, the economics of magical trade, and how real potion masters operated beyond the academic walls of Hogwarts. For the first time in his life, Severus had someone who challenged him, respected him, and taught him without condescension. And he thrived. Before everything fell apart, Severus had once belonged in the Evans household. He had spent countless afternoons in their small, warm home, sitting at the kitchen table with Lily, listening to Mr. Evans' stories about his work at a printing press, or watching Mrs. Evans bake apple tarts. For a long time, they had been the only family he had ever known. Mr. Evans had treated him like another son, never looking at him with disdain or judgment. He had patiently explained Muggle inventions, given Severus old books from his shop, and defended him whenever Petunia sneered at his freakishness. Mrs. Evans had a soft spot for him, always tucking extra food into his hands, worried about his thin frame. She noticed the too short sleeves of his second-hand robes, the bruises he never spoke about, the way he always hesitated before accepting kindness. They never asked about his home life, but they knew. And for years, Severus had believed he could always come back to their house, that it would always be a safe place. Until he had ruined it. Until he had called Lily that word. Until he had lost them. Now, as he sat alone in his rented room, reviewing his study notes, he realized how much emptier his summers had become. Lily Evans' summer, without Severus. Lily Evans sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling. It had been weeks, and there had been no letter from Severus. Not a single word. She told herself she didn't care, that she was better off without him, that she had made the right choice. But late at night, when the house was quiet, she couldn't ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. Her mother had noticed. At dinner one night, Mrs. Evans had asked about him. "Lily, have you heard from Severus?" Lily froze, forcing herself to keep eating. "No, Mom." Her mother frowned. "That's odd. He used to write every summer." Lily shrugged, keeping her voice casual. "We had a fight. We're not talking anymore." Her mother sighed softly, giving her a knowing look. "You were always close." "It's a shame." Lily didn't respond, because the truth was, she didn't know how she felt anymore. Petunia Evans POV. Petunia had always hated Severus Snape. He had stolen Lily's attention, whispered secrets to her about his freakish world, and looked at Petunia like she was nothing more than a foolish child. But this summer, something was different. There were no letters, no visits, and her mother was worried. For years, Petunia had resented how her parents welcomed that boy into their home. But now, she found herself listening closely, waiting to hear if anyone knew where he had gone. Because despite everything, Severus Snape had always been a part of their lives. And now he was just gone. Mrs. Evans worries. Mrs. Evans wasn't blind. She had seen the way Severus never had lunch money at school. She had noticed the way he flinched at sudden movements, the quiet way he accepted food, the way he had once clung to their kindness like it was the only thing keeping him from drowning. She had worried about him for years. And now, with no word from him, she was afraid. Afraid that something had happened. Afraid that no one was looking out for him anymore. Afraid that he had no one left. She didn't say it aloud. But as she stood in the kitchen, stirring a cup of tea, she couldn't shake the unease settling in her chest. She only hoped that wherever Severus was, he was safe. Tobias Snape's POV. Tobias Snape never realized how much of his life had been built around controlling others. Until the day he woke up and realized they were gone. Eileen, Severus, both of them vanished. There had been no warning, no fights, no slammed doors. One morning, he woke up, expecting to see Eileen in the kitchen, brewing her damn tea, expecting to hear Severus shuffling around quietly, avoiding his presence. But the house was silent. At first, he thought Eileen had simply gone out. But when he checked their bedroom, her clothes were gone. And when he checked Severus' room, it was empty. A hollow sinking feeling settled into his gut. He had never thought, never believed they would actually leave him. He had believed that Eileen was too weak, that Severus was too scared. But now, for the first time in decades, he was alone, and it terrified him. The Ministry of Magic's examination hall was nothing like the Hogwarts classrooms. It was a vast, sterile space, enchanted to block distractions, eliminate cheating, and ensure absolute neutrality in grading. Severus sat at his designated desk, feeling the eyes of the examiners, senior officials from the Wizarding Examinations Authority, watching his every move. Griselda Marchbanks, the elderly but sharp-eyed governor of the Examinations Authority, gave him a curt nod before signaling for the exam to begin. The first test was Muggle Studies. A simple exam that Severus breezed through with ease. Then came Care of Magical Creatures, which required detailed identification of magical beasts, their habitats, and the potion ingredients they could provide. By the time he reached dueling, Severus knew he was in his true element. Unlike Hogwarts, where students often sparred with inexperienced peers, the ministry provided professional duelists to test applicants. His opponent was a tall, broad-shouldered wizard with a calculating gaze. The moment the duel began, Severus fell into a fluid, controlled rhythm, dodging curses and countering with sharp, precise movements. His spells were fast, efficient, and unpredictable, a mix of traditional and self-modified techniques, many of which he had refined through Flitwick's training. When the duel ended with Severus standing victorious, he caught a flicker of approval in Griselda Marchbank's expression. That alone made the grueling day worth it. The final part of the exams was basic healing and languages, both of which he performed exceptionally in. By the time he left the ministry building, he was exhausted but confident. Now, all he had to do was wait for the results. After completing the exams, Severus made his way to the Department of Magical Records to finalize his emancipation. The process required a formal application signed by his mother, his former guardian. Since Eileen had already signed the documents, it was a matter of submitting them to the ministry for official approval. The clerk, a middle-aged witch with thick glasses, barely looked up as she took the documents. Processing will take about a week. Once it's finalized, all guardianship ties will be legally severed, she droned. Good, Severus replied, his tone clipped. He then handed her another set of forms. I'd also like to officially change my surname to reflect my rightful house. My name should be recorded as Severus Shafik in all legal documents, including my exam results. The witch blinked at him. You're claiming a most ancient and most noble house? Severus met her gaze without hesitation. I already have. She gave him a curious look before scribbling something on the parchment. Very well. Your records will be updated accordingly. Is there anything else? That will be all, Severus said, turning on his heel and walking out. It was done. Severus Snape was no more. Now, he was Severus Shafik. As he left the ministry building, Severus unexpectedly crossed paths with Griselda Marchbanks near the entrance hall. Ah, young Snape, Shafik now, is it? She said, raising an eyebrow. Severus inclined his head slightly. Governor Marchbanks. She looked him up and down. You performed well today. Not that I expected otherwise. Your duel was particularly impressive. Most Hogwarts students rely too much on raw power and not enough on technique. You, on the other hand, think before you strike. Severus allowed himself a small smirk. Dueling is as much about strategy as it is about magic. Griselda chuckled. Flitwick has trained you well. Severus hesitated for a moment before an idea struck him. Governor, I was wondering, he chose his words carefully. Is there any possibility of changing schools after OWLs? Would any institution accept a transfer student at this stage? Griselda gave him a sharp look, curiosity evident in her eyes. Why do you ask? Hogwarts is one of the finest institutions in the world, despite its quirks. Severus exhaled slowly. Let's just say I am exploring alternatives that might be more suited to my goals. Griselda hummed thoughtfully. As per the standard rules, most schools don't accept transfers after OWLs, but there are exceptions. She adjusted her robes before continuing. There is a chance of transferring through international exchange programs, specifically designed for fostering cooperation between magical communities. Some countries, like Japan, India, and the United States, offer one-year student exchange programs. Severus's interest sharpened. What are the requirements? The requirements are strict, Griselda warned. The exchange program is not for ordinary students. It's for those who have exceptional potential, unique skills, or who can contribute something valuable to the host institution. You would have to provide proof of your abilities, academic excellence, and recommendation from influential figures. Severus's mind worked quickly. He had top marks, a prestigious bloodline, and the favor of Flitwick, Pomfrey, and even Ragnarok at Gringotts. If anyone could qualify, it was him. Griselda studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. I will send you a detailed letter with information about these programs in the next couple of days. But remember, these are competitive placements. You'll have to prove that you're worthy of them. Severus smirked. I have no doubts about that, Governor. Griselda chuckled. I imagine you don't. With that, she strode away, leaving Severus standing at the ministry entrance, his mind racing with new possibilities. Severus walked through the busy streets of Diagon Alley, thoughts swirling in his mind. He had officially changed his name. His emancipation was being processed. He had performed excellently in his exams. And now, he had a chance, a real chance, to leave Hogwarts behind and study elsewhere. Perhaps Japan, where magic was deeply rooted in rituals and ancient enchantments. Or India, where potion making was intertwined with alchemy and elemental magic. Or even America, with its progressive, unorthodox approach to magic. The idea was tempting, more than tempting. Severus had always felt that Hogwarts had never been the right place for him. If there was another path, one that took him far away from Dumbledore's manipulations, the Marauder's torment, and the ghosts of his past. Then he would take it. With a determined smirk, he turned towards his future. And this time, he would write his own story. 3 days after his conversation with Griselda Marchbanks, an official-looking envelope arrived for Severus at Brew and Bloom Apothecary. The wax seal of the Wizarding Examinations Authority was unmistakable. Severus carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a crisp parchment letter filled with detailed information about the International Student Exchange Program. Wizarding International Student Exchange Program eligibility requirements. Outstanding academic performance in OWL-level subjects. Demonstrated proficiency in practical magic, especially in combat and potion making. Recommendations from at least 3 well-respected individuals in the field of magic. The ability to adapt to different magical cultures and regulations. Available locations: Mahoda Koro, Japan, specializing in ritual magic, flight arts, and calligraphy-based enchantments. Cold of Storets, Russia. Focused on combat magic, advanced elemental control, and hybrid transfiguration. Castelo Bruxo, Brazil, known for magical flora, beast mastery, and natural enchantments. Ilvermorny, United States, excelling in free-form spell casting, runic innovations, and alchemical experimentation. Duration: 1 academic year, 6th year, with the option to return to Hogwarts for 7th year and NEWTS approval process. Formal application with supporting documents. Interview with a ministry official. Final decision made by the host school's headmaster/headmistress. Severus had long been fascinated by Japan's ritual-based magic and Russia's brutal dueling schools, but language barriers and cultural differences would be an obstacle. Ilvermorny was the most practical choice. The curriculum was advanced, and it specialized in alchemical studies and free-form spell casting, which aligned well with Severus's goals. Moreover, English was the native language, making adaptation far easier. The decision was made. Severus was going to America. Severus needed recommendation letters from respected figures in the magical community. Fortunately, he had 4 names in mind. Severus found Professor Flitwick's contact address through an academic directory and sent a formal letter of request. Flitwick was pleased and immediately agreed to support his application. The letter highlighted Severus's talent and charms in dueling. Flitwick added that Severus had a strong mind for tactical spell work, an excellent trait for Ilvermorny. Severus had already written to Pomfrey about his inheritance, and she had always been fond of him. She agreed to write about his knowledge of healing magic and potions. She emphasized that Severus was self-driven and willing to go beyond the curriculum. Severus hesitated before sending a letter to Horace Slughorn, but he knew the man valued rising talent. Slughorn wrote a glowing recommendation about his potion skills and research abilities. However, Slughorn made it clear he hoped Severus would return to Hogwarts for 7th year. Severus approached Doria directly at Brew and Bloom. She agreed instantly, acknowledging that Severus was a rare talent in potion mastery. Her letter highlighted his ability to learn quickly, problem solve, and work under pressure. With 4 powerful recommendations, Severus was certain his application would be approved. A week later, Severus received another letter, this time from the International Magical Education Committee. Flitwick and Marchbanks had both personally backed his application. The exchange program had approved him for Ilvermorny. He was expected to arrive at Ilvermorny in early September. The plan was in motion. Severus would spend his 6th year in America, gaining skills outside Hogwarts' restrictive environment, in return for his final year stronger than ever. Before leaving for Ilvermorny, Severus planned to undergo body and mind enhancement rituals to strengthen himself. He activated Eva, his system assistant, and requested guidance. Small Blue Diamond Eva. Host has multiple options available. Would you like to prioritize physical enhancements, magical core strengthening, or cognitive enhancements? Small Blue Diamond Severus. All 3. I want to be in my best possible condition before I leave for Ilvermorny. Small Blue Diamond Eva. Acknowledged. Calculating optimal sequence. Small Blue Diamond Eva. The following ritual order is recommended. Body Enhancement. A potion-based ritual to enhance muscular strength, endurance, and agility. Mind Enhancement. A runic ritual to increase focus, mental clarity, and memory retention. Magical Core Expansion. a meditative infusion to increase spell-casting efficiency and raw magical power. Severus's stats before rituals: physical strength, below average magical core capacity, above average cognitive processing, high combat reflexes. Moderate. Severus gathered the rare ingredients needed and set up a private space in the room of requirement at night. The physical enhancement potion caused a burning sensation as his muscles adapted. The mental enhancement runes glowed brightly, sending a cool clarity through his mind. The core expansion process was the most intense, as he felt raw magic surging within him. After several days of recovery, the effects became apparent. Severus's stats after rituals: physical strength, above average magical core capacity, high cognitive processing, exceptional combat reflexes, enhanced. He had transformed. And he was ready. Everything was going perfectly. Severus had planned to keep his new identity a secret until the end of summer, until he had finished all his preparations. But life had other plans. That morning, he opened the Daily Prophet over breakfast and froze. Mystery: heir to the most ancient and most noble house of Shafiq revealed. By Rita Skeeter. For years, the prestigious Shafiq family was believed to be extinct, their noble bloodline lost to history. However, recent ministry records confirm the emergence of an unexpected heir, none other than Hogwarts student Severus Snape, now legally recognized as Severus Shafiq. This revelation has sent shockwaves through wizarding society, raising questions about how a presumed half-blood could claim such an esteemed title. Sources at Gringotts indicate that the Shafiq inheritance was reinstated through ancient family magic, a rare occurrence that suggests the heir was deemed worthy. The implications of this discovery are vast, especially with rumors swirling about his involvement in the International Student Exchange Program, which will take him out of Britain for his 6th year. One thing is clear: the wizarding world has great expectations for the new Lord Shafiq. Severus gritted his teeth. His carefully crafted plan had been exposed ahead of schedule. Now, everyone would know. He folded the newspaper with controlled fury, exhaling slowly. This was not the end of his plan. It was just another obstacle to overcome. With cold determination, he prepared himself, because when he returned to Britain for his final year, he would not be the same Severus they once knew. Albus Dumbledore's POV. Albus Dumbledore had spent decades carefully observing, guiding, and manipulating the pieces of the wizarding world like a grand chessboard. But this, he had not anticipated. The morning's edition of the Daily Prophet lay open on his desk, the headline practically screaming at him. Mystery: heir to the most ancient and most noble house of Shafiq revealed. Severus Snape, now recognized as Severus Shafiq. His usually twinkling blue eyes were sharp as ice as he read the article twice over, digesting every detail. The Shafiq family. He had known of Severus's connection to the Prince family, that had always been apparent. But the Shafiq line was a complete mystery to him. How did I not see this? Dumbledore's mind immediately went into analysis mode, dissecting every interaction he had ever had with Severus. For years, he had considered Severus a vulnerable but highly intelligent student, one who could be shaped and guided in the fight against Voldemort. There were too many similarities to another student Dumbledore had once known: Tom Riddle. Both were half-bloods, raised in less than ideal circumstances. Both were brilliant beyond their peers, excelling in subjects others struggled with. Both had an innate ambition, a deep need to prove themselves. And now, like Riddle, Severus had found a way to rise beyond his station. But how did he do it without my knowledge? The exchange program was another unexpected revelation. Dumbledore had made sure that no one at Hogwarts was even aware of such an opportunity. Yet somehow, Severus had discovered it, applied, and been accepted, all without anyone in the school knowing. It was deeply unsettling. He had underestimated Severus Snape, and he would not make that mistake again. Lucius Malfoy's POV. Lucius Malfoy had spent his entire life understanding the power of bloodlines and alliances, and today he had been caught off guard. The moment he read the article, he summoned a house elf to fetch more details. Severus Shafiq. He had always looked down upon Severus Snape, a half-blood from a poor background, a useful acquaintance, but nothing more. But if he was now the rightful heir to the Shafiq family, that changed everything. The Shafiqs were not just any pure-blood family. They were one of the most ancient and most noble houses. And they had money. A lot of it. Lucius leaned back in his chair, fingertips pressed together thoughtfully. I may have underestimated him. This development made Severus a potential ally, or, if he played his cards wrong, a potential rival. Lucius would have to reevaluate his approach. Lily Evans' POV. Lily Evans had spent the last few months convincing herself that she didn't care about Severus anymore. But the moment she read the article, her heart stopped. Severus Snape, now recognized as Severus Snape, accepted into the international exchange program, studying abroad in America. She reread it 3 times, unable to process the words. He was leaving Britain? He was a lord? Lily sat down heavily, her thoughts racing. How did this happen? Why didn't he tell me? A lump formed in her throat as she remembered their last conversation, the anger, the hurtful words exchanged. And now? He had completely moved on. Without her. Mrs. Evans' POV. Mrs. Evans was shocked when she saw Severus's name in the paper. She had always known he was special, but this was something else entirely. She turned to Lily, eyes full of curiosity. Lily, did you know about this? Lily's fingers tightened around her teacup. No, I had no idea. Her mother frowned. He's going to America? That's quite far. Lily forced a smile, pretending it didn't matter. I suppose he wanted something new, she said casually. Mrs. Evans wasn't convinced. She knew her daughter too well. Sirius Black's POV. Sirius had always seen Severus as an easy target, a pathetic, greasy Slytherin who was far beneath them. So when James shoved the Daily Prophet in his face, he expected another stupid ministry scandal. Instead, his jaw dropped. Severus Snape, now Lord Severus Snape. Sirius let out a bark of disbelieving laughter. Bloody hell. Who would have thought Severus was actually pure-blooded aristocracy? James scowled, looking far less amused. It doesn't matter, James muttered. He's still the same slimy git. Sirius smirked. Yeah, but a rich slimy git now. James didn't laugh. Something about this bothered him. James Potter's POV. James had spent years tormenting Severus Snape. And now Snape, no Snape, was leaving Britain to study abroad, had secured a noble title, and was rising above everything they had ever thrown at him. For the first time in his life, James felt something he had never associated with Severus Snape before. Unease. Severus was supposed to be insignificant, a footnote in their story. But now, he was becoming something bigger. And James hated it. Horace Slughorn's POV. Horace Slughorn was delighted. When he saw Severus's name in the paper, he practically beamed with pride. Ah, I knew the boy had potential. A lord now is he. He immediately wrote a letter to Severus, extending a congratulatory note and a not-societal invitation to future Slug Club events. A rising noble potioneer? Horace would make sure to keep him close. Minerva McGonagall's POV. Minerva McGonagall prided herself on remaining impartial. But as she sat at her desk, staring at the headline, she felt something she hadn't expected. Guilt. Severus Snape had been a brilliant student, but he had been neglected, overshadowed, and dismissed. And now? He had taken his own future into his hands. Minerva folded the newspaper with a sigh. Perhaps we have failed him more than we realized. The ripples of change. The news of Severus's rise spread faster than wildfire. Pure-blood families whispered among themselves, wondering what this meant for the power balance. Hogwarts students buzzed with rumors about how Snape had tricked his way into a noble house. Dumbledore was left strategizing, realizing that Severus had grown beyond his reach. And amidst all of it, one thing became clear. Severus Snape was no longer just another Slytherin student. He was a force to be reckoned with. The moment Severus stepped into Brew and Bloom Apothecary that morning, an uneasy feeling twisted in his gut. Something was off. The usual rhythmic bubbling of cauldrons and the low hum of conversation were absent, replaced by a charged silence that made his skin prickle. And then the whispers started. That's him, Lord Snape. Who would have thought a Hogwarts half-blood would turn out to be a noble? I heard he's rich now. Do you think he'll quit working here? Maybe he bribed his way into that title. Severus' jaw clenched. His grip tightened around his bag strap, nails digging into the worn leather. He forced himself to move forward, even as every step felt like walking across a stage with the entire shop as his unwanted audience. Their eyes burned into him, some filled with curiosity, others with thinly veiled suspicion. Doria Langston, his mentor, stood behind the counter, arms crossed, a single brow arched in silent question. It was infuriating. He had worked here for over a month. And now, just because of a title, they looked at him as if he were someone else, someone unfamiliar. The final straw came when a customer boldly stepped forward, voice sickly sweet with faux politeness. "So, my lord, will you still be gracing us common folk with your presence?" A sharp, icy anger flared in his chest. He turned on his heel, gaze as cold as steel. "I am here to work, not to entertain gossip." The words cut through the air like a blade. Silence followed. A heavy, weighted silence. Without another word, he strode to the back, already feeling the telltale pressure of a headache forming between his temples. Why was it always like this? Why did the world insist on picking him apart, shoving him into labels that never fit? A summons from the prince family that evening. As Severus was locking up the shop, the flutter of wings broke through the quiet. An owl. Its presence alone sent a sense of foreboding down his spine. The prince family seal confirmed his suspicion before he even unrolled the parchment. His uncle's neat, sharp handwriting filled the page. "Severus, I have seen today's headlines, and I am concerned. Your identity should have remained private for a while longer. This attention makes you a target, and I will not allow a member of this family to wander around unprotected. Your mother and I both insist that you come to stay at Prince Manor until you leave for America. Do not argue. We will expect you tomorrow." Lord Arcturus Prince Severus exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. The tension from the day threatened to morph into frustration, but he couldn't deny the logic behind the demand. The attention was suffocating. Staying alone in Diagon Alley left him vulnerable, too vulnerable. And truthfully, a part of him was tired. Tired of fighting against forces he couldn't control. Tired of feeling like he had to defend his existence at every turn. So, for once, he didn't argue. The next morning, he packed his things and left. Life at Prince Manor was nothing like Spinner's End. Where his childhood home had been cramped, suffocating, filled with the ever-present scent of stale air and desperation, Prince Manor was expansive. Sprawling gardens, silent corridors lined with ancient tomes, the soft glow of candlelight flickering against polished wood. It wasn't just the grandeur that unsettled him, it was the peace. And then there was Arcturus Prince. His uncle was an enigma. He valued hard work and intellect, not just blood status. He was uncompromising, but never cruel. He was not warm, but he was present, something Severus had never experienced from a father figure before. "You are a prince now, whether you carry the name or not," Arcturus had told him on the first night. "That means you will act like one." Severus had expected to feel trapped by those words. Instead, he found that he didn't mind. Severus had assumed that his cousin, the current prince heir, would be an insufferable, spoiled brat. He was wrong. The 10-year-old barreled toward him the moment he entered the drawing room, wild black curls bouncing, green eyes bright with excitement. "Are you my cousin?" Before Severus could react, the child latched onto him, arms wrapping around his waist in a tight hug. Severus blinked. His arms remained awkwardly at his sides for a moment before he hesitantly patted the boy's shoulder. "I suppose I am." Julius beamed. "I'm Julius. I thought I was the only young prince left. Now I have an older cousin." Severus stared. This boy was nothing like what he had imagined. He was loud, friendly, persistent, and he never stopped talking. "Can you teach me potions? Are you really going to America? Do you have a girlfriend?" Severus choked on his tea. Julius smirked. "I knew it." Severus sighed. Living here was going to be interesting. For the first time in years, Severus felt the warmth of a family. Not just one built on duty and legacy, but something softer. It made him think of the Evans family. The dinners. The fireplace. Mrs. Evans' quiet kindness. The way she always made sure he had eaten. Always treated him as her own. And now, he was leaving. For good. And she had no idea. His fingers tightened around his quill as a dull ache formed in his chest. This was something he had to fix before it was too late. Letter to Mrs. Evans. Dear Mrs. Evans, I hope this letter finds you well. I know this may be unexpected, but I am writing to you because there are things I would like to say before I leave for America. I will be studying abroad at Ilvermorny for a year, and before I go, I would like to meet you. There are things I want to tell you, things that I believe should be said before I leave Britain. I understand if you do not wish to meet me, but if you do, I will be in Prince Manor until I depart. If you agree, please send a response through the elf delivering this letter. This meeting will remain private between us. I ask that Lily not be informed for the time being. Thank you." Severus he sealed the letter, running his fingers over the wax insignia before handing it to the Prince family elf. "Make sure Mrs. Evans receives this directly. No one else." The elf bowed and vanished. Severus leaned back, staring at the flickering candlelight. This was something he had to do, and he could only hope she would understand why. Severus had spent the past few days in Prince Manor, waiting. For all his careful planning, this was the one thing he could not control, whether Mrs. Evans would agree to meet him. Then, one evening, a soft pop echoed in his chambers as the Prince family elf reappeared, holding a neatly folded letter. Severus took it with steady hands, unfolding the parchment. Dear Severus, I was surprised to receive your letter, but I am glad that you wrote to me. Of course, I will meet you. You have always been welcome in our home, and that has not changed. I will be in London next Thursday. If you are comfortable, we can meet at the Green Ivy Tea House in Muggle London at 2 p.m. It is a quiet place where we will not be disturbed. I trust your request for privacy, and I will respect it. See you soon. Rose Evans. Severus exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. It was happening. One last conversation before he left Britain. Preparing for the meeting when Thursday arrived, Severus dressed in simple, well-fitted black trousers with black shirt, nothing too extravagant, but elegant enough to reflect his new status. He wasn't the scrawny, poor boy Mrs. Evans had once known. He was now Lord Severus Shafik. And yet, as he stood before the mirror, adjusting his collar, he realized that, for this meeting, he wasn't trying to be a lord. He was just Severus. For once, that was enough. Meeting Mrs. Evans. The Green Ivy Tea House was a small, cozy cafe in London, tucked away from the busy streets. As Severus stepped inside, the scent of freshly brewed tea and baked pastries filled the air. And then, he saw her. Rose Evans, sitting at a corner table, her hands gently folded on the tablecloth. She looked just as he remembered, warm, kind, and always carrying that quiet motherly concern in her eyes. When she saw him, she stood up immediately. Severus. Her voice was soft, but filled with emotion. He hesitated for only a second before stepping forward. She reached out, and for the first time in years, Severus allowed himself to be embraced. For a brief moment, he let himself relax, feeling the familiar warmth of someone who had once been like a mother to him. Then, they sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Mrs. Evans studied him carefully, her kind eyes taking in the man who had replaced the scrawny boy she once knew. You've changed, she said softly. Severus smirked slightly. People tend to do that. A small chuckle left her lips, but then she tilted her head. You wanted to talk before you leave for America. What is it, Severus? He took a deep breath. There were many things he could have said, but only one thing truly mattered. I need you to understand what happened, he said. Why things turned out the way they did. She gave him an encouraging nod. Then tell me. And so, for the first time, Severus spoke the truth. The realities of Wizarding Britain, the Wizarding world, is nothing like the Muggle world, Severus began, leaning forward. There, things like laws and social structures give the illusion of fairness. In Wizarding Britain, everything is dictated by one thing, blood. Rose frowned. I know there's prejudice, but it's worse than you think, Severus cut in. And so he explained. Purebloods control everything. The ministry, the economy, and the laws. Everything is structured to benefit them. Half-bloods like me, we're in limbo. Not accepted fully by pureblood society, but still looked down upon by many Muggleborns for being too Slytherin. Muggleborns? They have talent, but no power. They enter the wizarding world with no family connections, no land, and no influence. By the time they figure out how things work, they're already playing from behind. Mrs. Evans looked disturbed. That's awful. Severus gave a humorless chuckle. It is, but it gets worse. You think of Hogwarts as a school, Severus continued, his voice sharper now. But it's really just a training ground for future political battles. Mrs. Evans blinked. What do you mean? Severus's fingers curled around his teacup. The house system was supposed to encourage growth and diversity, he said bitterly. Instead, it creates divisions that never heal. Gryffindors think they're the heroes, the righteous ones. Ravenclaws believe they're the enlightened ones, above politics. Hufflepuffs are ignored, as if their loyalty is a weakness instead of a strength. And Slytherins? We are labeled as villains before we even step foot in the castle. Mrs. Evans's expression darkened. Severus exhaled slowly. Once you're sorted into Slytherin, you aren't given a choice. You survive by making allies, by adapting. And if you don't, you're eaten alive. You don't understand, Mrs. Evans, Severus continued. Lily didn't understand either. Mrs. Evans tinced at her daughter's name. Severus didn't stop. She sees the world in black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. But the world isn't that simple. She thinks I should shun the Slytherins and stay away from the politics. But she doesn't understand. If I didn't make alliances, I wouldn't have survived. If I had openly opposed them, I would have been targeted even more. I had to find a way to exist within the system, not fight it blindly like a fool. To Lily, it was as simple as choosing good over evil. Severus clenched his jaw, but she never once tried to understand what it was like to be in my position. She also never saw the hypocrisy of the people she surrounded herself with, Severus muttered. Mrs. Evans narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? He let out a bitter laugh. You know James Potter and Sirius Black? Of course, she said. Lily speaks of them often. Severus scoffed. I bet she does. Then, his voice lowered, sharper now. They are bullies, Mrs. Evans. Cruel, privileged Gryffindors who could do whatever they wanted because Dumbledore favored them. Mrs. Evans's face paled. Severus leaned forward, voice tight with old anger. Do you know how many times I was hexed in the halls? Strung up in the air for everyone to laugh at? How many times I had to fight back and got punished while they walked away with nothing? Mrs. Evans looked horrified. Severus, no one did anything, he interrupted. Not the teachers. Not McGonagall. Not even Slughorn. Because James Potter was a golden boy. Because Sirius Black was from an influential family. Because Dumbledore didn't care as long as they didn't kill me. Mrs. Evans covered her mouth with her hand. I had no protection, Severus whispered. No allies outside of Slytherin. And then there was Lily, Severus said, quieter now. Mrs. Evans braced herself. I thought she was my friend, Severus murmured. I thought she would always stand by me. Mrs. Evans nodded. She loved you, Severus. In her own way. Severus exhaled. Maybe. But she never understood me. She never understood why I had to befriend purebloods to survive. She never understood why I couldn't afford to be naive like her. She never understood the price I had to pay just to exist. And when I made a mistake, when I said something I regretted, she didn't try to understand, he whispered. She just walked away. The silence was deafening after Severus finished speaking. Mrs. Evans sat there, hands folded, processing everything he had told her. Then, finally, she sighed. I failed you, didn't I? She murmured. Severus blinked. What? She shook her head, looking at him with sadness, but also admiration. I always thought, as long as you and Lily had each other, you would be fine. But I never asked about your life at Hogwarts. I never noticed how bad things were for you. Severus swallowed thickly. You weren't supposed to know. Mrs. Evans gave a sad smile. You've carried so much alone, haven't you? Severus looked away. She reached across the table, gently taking his hand in hers. You deserved better, she whispered. I'm sorry we never gave it to you. Severus didn't respond. He couldn't. Because if he did, he wasn't sure his voice would remain steady. Before they parted, Mrs. Evans reached into her purse and pulled out a small, wrapped box. Severus frowned. What is this? She smiled softly. Just something to remember that not everyone in Britain failed you. Severus hesitated, then accepted it. Write to me, she asked as they stepped outside. Severus paused. Then, slowly he nodded. I will. Her smile widened. Then this isn't goodbye. And for the first time in years, Severus felt lighter. Maybe there was still a place for him in someone's heart, even if it wasn't Lily's. Severus stood before the entrance to the Room of Requirement, concealed deep within the winding corridors of Hogwarts. It was late, past midnight, but the castle was quiet. This would be his last visit. He had been planning for months to clear out the centuries-old treasures hidden within the room. Now, with his emancipation secured and an independent vault at Gringotts, there was nothing stopping him from taking everything of value. He closed his eyes, concentrating on what he needed. I need a place that holds everything lost and forgotten. A place that hides the treasures of Hogwarts. The stone wall before him shimmered, the enchanted entrance forming with a faint hum of ancient magic. Severus stepped inside. The Room of Requirement was an ocean of forgotten artifacts. Towering stacks of ancient books, chests overflowing with gold, and priceless magical artifacts gathered dust, untouched for centuries. This was Hogwarts' unspoken wealth, forgotten by history, until now. Severus summoned his wand and cast detection charms, scanning the vast expanse for anything of significance. He had already gathered some items in previous visits, but tonight was the final haul. What he found made even him pause. As Severus moved through the maze of hidden riches, he cataloged his most valuable acquisitions. Gold and currency, for 0.5 million galleons scattered across dozens of enchanted trunks. Thousands of sickles and nuts, worth an estimated 250,000 galleons when converted. Jewelry and precious stones, dozens of rings, necklaces, and brooches from old wizarding families. Priceless diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires, likely worth millions more. An ancient goblin-crafted bracelet, enchanted to enhance magical stamina. Rare and unique magical artifacts, a fully functional pensieve. One intact time-turner, extremely rare. 2 broken time-turners, potentially reparable. A pair of seer's spectacles, rumored to enhance visions of the future. A set of enchanted dueling robes, designed to deflect weaker curses. Books and scrolls of lost knowledge. An original translation of the art of ancient runes, lost for over 400 years. A forbidden manuscript on blood magic, banned by the ministry. Several books on wand lore and magical craftsmanship, likely older than Hogwarts itself. Dark objects and cursed items. A cursed dagger from the 15th century, rumored to drain the magical core of its wielder. Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, long believed lost, but now tainted by a dark presence. The moment Severus picked up the diadem, a cold shiver ran down his spine. A whispering voice slithered into his thoughts, laced with something ancient and foul. Wisdom is power. Power is eternal. Severus immediately recoiled, dropping the diadem onto a silk-wrapped cloth. He had read enough about soul magic to recognize what this was. A Horcrux, something Voldemort had tainted with his very soul. But unlike in the original timeline, where no one except Dumbledore, Harry Potter, and a handful of others even knew about Horcruxes, Severus had prior knowledge. George Paddington had read the books. He had watched the movies. He had seen this exact diadem destroyed in a fire. But this wasn't just about knowing what the object was. It was about understanding how Horcruxes worked. And Severus had deep knowledge of soul magic from his studies. He had read ancient tomes on soul fragmentation, spiritual integrity, and necromantic rituals. He had always been fascinated by the idea of immortality, not in the way Voldemort pursued it, but in the concept of preserving knowledge and magic beyond death. Now, standing here with a real Horcrux in his hands, Severus wasn't just disgusted. He was intrigued. What can I learn from this? Then, he pushed the thought aside. Now was not the time for experiments. He would not be like Voldemort. But he would be smart. If he destroyed it himself, it would cause a surge of dark magic, one that might be detected. No, there was only one place where this could be handled discreetly. Gringotts. And Severus knew exactly who to contact. After securing all the treasures within enchanted trunks, Severus knew there was one more thing he needed. A personal house elf. The amount of wealth he had just taken from the Room of Requirement required discretion, efficiency, and security. A properly trained elf would be invaluable in handling his affairs, especially once he left for Ilvermorny. And there was only one place to buy an elf without ministry interference. Nocturne Alley. The house elf market Nocturne Alley was as grimy and unwelcoming as ever. The air reeked of old parchment, damp wood, and forbidden magic. Severus made his way through the shadowed alleyways until he reached a hidden underground market, where magical contracts were exchanged in whispers. A wizened old wizard greeted him with a toothy grin. "Ah, a young nobleman seeking an elf, are you?" Severus nodded sharply. "I need a well-trained elf, one capable of managing wealth, handling wards, and securing sensitive information." The old wizard chuckled. "A Shafiq noble through and through. I have just the one." A small elf with dark green eyes and large ears stepped forward, bowing low. "Master requires an elf who is silent, discreet, and clever." Severus studied the creature. "Your name?" "Trix." "Trix is fast, silent, and knows how to hide things from prying eyes." Severus smirked. "Perfect." With Trix's help, Severus transferred everything from the Room of Requirement into his personal vault at Gringotts. It was a massive haul, increasing his fortune tenfold. And then, there was one final matter to address. Severus sat in a private Gringotts chamber, the cursed diadem wrapped in silk before him. Across from him sat Ragnarok, chief of the goblin banking clan. Severus pushed the hefty pouch of galleons forward. I need this purified. I don't care what it costs. Ragnox studied him carefully, his sharp goblin eyes gleaming with interest. A Horcrux, is it? The goblin murmured. Severus didn't flinch. Yes. Ragnox's lips curled. Very well. Severus leaned back, exhaling softly. The last remnants of Voldemort's corruption would be removed. And with that, his final preparations were complete. It was early morning at Prince Manor, and Severus was seated in the study, sipping a strong cup of tea, when an official-looking envelope bearing the crest of the Wizarding Examinations Authority landed on his desk. His OWL results had arrived. He took a deep breath, fingers steady as he unfolded the parchment. Severus Shafik's OWL results, standard Hogwarts subjects. Potions, outstanding, new record, highest score in Britain. Charms, outstanding, new record, highest score in Britain. Ancient runes, outstanding, new record, highest score in Britain. Dueling, outstanding, new record, highest score in Britain. Defense against the dark arts, outstanding. Astronomy, outstanding. Herbology, outstanding. Arithmancy, outstanding. Transfiguration, exceeds expectations. History of magic, exceeds expectations. Additional OWLs registered at the Ministry. Muggle studies, outstanding, highest recorded score. Care of magical creatures, outstanding. Healing magic, basic medical wizardry, outstanding. Languages, Latin, French, and Irish proficiency, outstanding. Severus set the parchment down, staring at it in disbelief. He had beaten Albus Dumbledore's records in 4 different subjects: potions, charms, ancient runes, and dueling. For once, the wizarding world would not be comparing him to Tom Riddle, but to Albus Dumbledore himself. He let out a slow, measured breath. This was the beginning of something greater. With a thought, Severus activated Eva, his system assistant. Small blue diamond Severus. Eva, how has my progress in altering the course of Severus Snape's life changed with these results? Small blue diamond Eva. Host has exceeded expectations. The original Severus Snape was an exceptional potioneer, but his academic achievements were limited by bias, isolation, and personal struggles. Host has altered this trajectory by establishing dominance in multiple fields, breaking academic records, and gaining political influence. Small blue diamond Severus. And my rewards? Small blue diamond Eva, congratulations. Host has unlocked the Scholarly Legacy reward. Reward received, Scholarly Legacy effect. Enhances memory retention, spell efficiency, and comprehension speed for all magical texts. Additional bonus. Increases learning speed for complex spells and magical languages by 30%. Permanent skill boost. Host now has a photographic memory for magical research. Severus closed his eyes, letting the effects sink in. His mind felt sharper, as though layers of fog had been lifted. This was exactly what he needed. That afternoon, Severus was summoned to his uncle's study. Arcturus Prince sat behind his desk, a glass of fire whiskey in one hand, the Daily Prophet in the other. Without a word, he handed the newspaper to Severus. Severus frowned and took it, eyes landing on the front page headline. The Shafik heir speaks. Exclusive interview with Severus Shafik, or is it? After the shocking revelation of his heritage, sources from Hogwarts confirmed that Severus Snape, now legally recognized as Severus Shafik, was known as a half-blood Slytherin outcast before his sudden rise. The question remains, was this inheritance a convenient fabrication, or is the last Shafik heir truly as noble as his name suggests? Severus crushed the newspaper in his hands, irritation flaring in his chest. Arcturus took a slow sip of fire whiskey, watching him with mild amusement. Let me guess, Severus muttered. Rita Skeeter? Arcturus chuckled. You'd be correct. She's been sniffing around ever since the first article dropped. She can smell a rising power from miles away. Severus exhaled sharply, forcing himself to calm down. I suppose this was inevitable. It was, his uncle agreed. But it's also an opportunity. Severus raised an eyebrow. How so? Arcturus leaned forward. The wizarding world sees you as an unknown variable. They don't know whether to fear you, admire you, or dismiss you. You can use that uncertainty to your advantage. Severus smirked. Let them wonder then. Arcturus smiled in approval. Exactly. Severus, however, wasn't done yet. Before leaving for Ilvermorny, he would leave a parting gift for the British wizarding press. He hired a lawyer from one of the best pure-blood law firms in Diagon Alley. He filed a lawsuit against the Daily Prophet and Rita Skeeter for defamation and unlawful use of a sacred 28 house's name without permission. For once, Severus was extremely happy for the one-sided laws favoring purebloods. As the legal papers were prepared, Severus smirked to himself. Let's see how well Rita Skeeter enjoys being on the receiving end of a scandal. At the Daily Prophet's office, Barnabas Cuff, editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet, sat at his desk, rereading the official notice that had arrived that morning. His fingers tightened around the parchment. Legal notice of defamation and unauthorized use of a noble house's name filed by Lord Severus Snape against Rita Skeeter and the Daily Prophet claims defamation, unlawful use of a sacred 28 house's name without permission, malicious slander, legal action. Formal lawsuit filed in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Barnabas felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. This was serious. Skeeter had gone too far this time. Slandering a mere Hogwarts student was one thing, but insulting a most ancient and most noble house, that was a legal nightmare. Even worse, thanks to the archaic, pure blood-favoring laws still in place, Severus Snape had every legal advantage. If the lawsuit went through, the Daily Prophet would not only have to pay a substantial fine, they would also be forced to publicly retract the article and apologize. And for the Prophet, an apology was worse than a loss of gold. It was a loss of credibility. Barnabas slammed his fist onto his desk. "Skeeter, you damned fool," he muttered under his breath. This was going to be a disaster. Severus smirked as he read his lawyer's confirmation letter. The Daily Prophet was scrambling. They were already trying to negotiate a settlement. Rita Skeeter had gone into hiding, no doubt trying to avoid public humiliation. And soon, they would be forced to admit their mistake. For once, Severus was grateful for the pure blood-biased legal system. It was about time someone taught the press a lesson. And this was only the beginning. It was a humiliating loss for the Daily Prophet. After weeks of legal battles, the Wisengamot ruled in favor of Lord Severus Snape, forcing the newspaper to issue a full public apology. The following morning, a bold headline graced the front page of the Prophet. Official retraction and apology to Lord Severus Snape by Barnabas Cuff. Editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet. The Daily Prophet wishes to issue a formal apology to Lord Severus Snape for the previous article published regarding his inheritance and noble status. We acknowledge that the article in question contained false information, misleading speculation, and improper use of a sacred 28 house's name without consent. Furthermore, to highlight the achievements of Lord Snape, we would like to bring to public attention that he has broken long-standing academic records in the Wizarding Examinations Authority, achieving the highest recorded scores in potions, charms, ancient runes, and dueling, surpassing Albus Dumbledore himself. His full OWL results are listed below. The OWL scores of Lord Severus Snape, the youngest genius in Britain. Potions, outstanding new record, highest score in Britain. Charms, outstanding new record, highest score in Britain. Ancient runes, outstanding new record, highest score in Britain. Defense against the dark arts, outstanding. Astronomy, outstanding. Herbology, outstanding. Arithmancy, outstanding. Transfiguration, exceeds expectations. History of magic, exceeds expectations. Additional OWLs taken at the ministry. Dueling, outstanding new record, highest score in Britain. Muggle studies, outstanding, highest recorded score. Care of magical creatures, outstanding. Healing magic, basic medical wizardry, outstanding. Languages, Latin, French, and Irish proficiency, outstanding. This stunning academic performance, coupled with his recent inheritance and acceptance into the International Student Exchange Program, has made Lord Snape a rising figure in British wizarding society. The Daily Prophet sincerely apologizes for any harm or inconvenience caused. Albus Dumbledore's POV. Albus Dumbledore sat in his headmaster's office, fingers tapping the wooden surface of his desk as he read the Daily Prophet's apology and OWL report. The headlines had already spread like wildfire. Severus had not only proven himself beyond expectation, but he had now become a figure of public admiration. Dumbledore's brows furrowed. This changes everything. He had assumed Severus would always be a student overshadowed by his circumstances, brilliant but stuck in the shadows. He had believed that Severus's low status would keep him dependent, needing Hogwarts and needing Dumbledore's guidance. Now, that assumption had been shattered. Dumbledore had seen only 2 students in Hogwarts history break such records, himself and Tom Riddle. Severus was neither under his influence nor under his watchful eye. And now, the boy was leaving for Ilvermorny. Dumbledore sighed, staring into the distance. I have underestimated you, Severus Shafik. Lily Evans POV. Lily stared at the front page of the newspaper, her hands trembling slightly. Her eyes kept returning to his name. Highest recorded scores in 4 subjects. Surpassing Dumbledore himself. Accepted into the International Exchange Program. The Severus Snape she had known had always been brilliant, but overlooked. The Severus in this article was someone entirely different. Someone who had grown without her. Her mother had asked about Severus the other day, but Lily had avoided the conversation. Because now, as she read these headlines, something ugly twisted inside her. How did he do all of this, without me? And worse, why didn't he tell me? Lucius Malfoy's POV. Lucius Malfoy sat in Malfoy Manor, staring at the newspaper. His grip tightened slightly as he read the OWL scores and the public apology. A new power is rising. Severus Snape had always been a half-blood beneath his notice. But Severus Shafik? A record-breaking genius. A noble heir. A potential rival. Lucius set the newspaper down, adjusting his platinum cufflinks thoughtfully. It seems I underestimated him. Severus was no longer someone to look down upon. Now, he was someone to watch. James Potter's POV. James Potter threw the Daily Prophet onto his desk, scowling. Bloody hell, he's getting way too much attention. Sirius snatched the paper up, whistling. Damn, mate. Snavelis is actually smart. Who knew? James hated the way people were talking about Severus now. For years, Snape had been just some greasy Slytherin, easy to mock, easy to dismiss. No? Now people were comparing him to Dumbledore. James clenched his fists. Severus wasn't supposed to be important. And yet, now he was. And James despised it. As Severus finished packing his belongings, he set aside a neatly wrapped package and a sealed letter. He handed them to Trix, his personal elf. Deliver this to Mrs. Evans, Severus instructed. Ensure that only she receives it. No one else. The elf nodded sharply and disappeared with a pop. Severus took a deep breath, staring at the now empty desk in his chambers. This was it. His final goodbye. Letter to Rose Evans. Dear Mrs. Evans, I write this letter knowing that by the time you receive it, I will be on my way to America. I wanted to thank you, one last time, for your kindness when I had nothing, for your warmth when my home was cold, for treating me like family when I was not your own. I cannot change the past, nor can I undo the choices that led me here. But I can move forward, knowing that not all of my memories of Britain are bitter. You once told me that I was always welcome in your home. That is not something I can accept. Not because I don't wish to, but because the path I walk now is one I must take alone. But I will remember you, Mrs. Evans. And though I do not ask for it, I hope you will remember me as well. Enclosed with this letter is something that belonged to my mother's family. A prince heirloom. It is said to bring clarity to those who seek the truth. It is not a gift to Lily. It is for you. For the kindness you have always given me. Take care. Severus. Inside the small package lay a delicate silver pendant, encrusted with a small, clear gemstone that shimmered faintly with enchanted magic. It was an heirloom of the Prince family, a charm meant to bring clarity to one's thoughts and emotions. It had been buried among forgotten treasures, yet Severus had recognized its worth. He did not expect Mrs. Evans to ever fully understand his choices, nor did he expect her to forgive the past. But if nothing else, he hoped that she would remember him, not as the boy Lily had abandoned, but as the man he had chosen to become. On Lord Prince's suggestion, Severus agreed to host a small farewell gathering at Prince Manor before leaving for the U.S. The guest list was exclusive, limited only to trusted figures. Arcturus had arranged an elegant but private event, ensuring no press intrusion. Julius Prince, Severus's young cousin, was overjoyed, clinging to his older cousin throughout the night. Severus looked around at the small but meaningful gathering. Arcturus Prince nodded at him in approval, his sharp eyes filled with pride. Doria Langston, his potions mentor, raised a glass to him, smirking. Go show those Ilvermorny students what real potion-making looks like. Madame Pomfrey squeezed his shoulder, whispering, I expect you to return even stronger, Severus. For the first time in his 2 lives, Severus felt acknowledged. As Severus stepped onto the balcony of Prince Manor, looking at the expansive British landscape, he smirked. He had won his legal battle. He had gained recognition for his genius, and he was leaving Britain on his own terms. The wizarding world had once overlooked Severus Snape, but they would never ignore Lord Severus Snape.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.